Refusing to let go of the past is the surest way to not have a future. Damn it. I hate mornings like this. It was a fresh, clear spring morning with a feeling of renewal in the air. The birds were singing, the sun was shining, the leaves and grass were starting to turn green, and I was miserable. I wish I was like Storm from the X-Men and had the weather reflect my mood. Then it would have been a completely different day. The sky would be gray and the air as cold as my mood. As I ran the last few steps around my block, I saw one of my neighbors, who was trying to start his lawnmower, wave at me. I waved back with a much more cheerful gesture than I actually felt. It was good, I told myself. Just keep pretending to be cheerful and no one will know how you really feel. There was a satisfied little smile on my face. In fact, that smile was more about getting through another day without breaking down than a reflection of my true mood. As I approached my house, I noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway. She was parked right behind my 2009 Grabber orange Mustang GT. As I slowed to a walk, I recognized the truck. Sarah came in a couple of times when she needed to bring her things to my house. She had so much junk here that many people thought she lived with me. Seeing the truck, I forced myself to make my smile not wider, but happier in order to keep a good face on a bad game. I was prepared for her to either try to play on my feelings and ask me to go back to what we had, or if that didn't work, she would stoically pack her things and get the hell out of my life. Hell, I'll even help her move if necessary. I was a little disappointed when I walked up to the front of the truck and saw not Sarah, but some guy. He wasn't big and imposing or small and pathetic, he was just a guy. He wore a baseball cap over his graying hair, a red and white flannel shirt over jeans, and sneakers. He couldn't be more casual if he tried. "Hi, Bill," he said as I approached. "You must be, Bobby, her brother," I said, trying to maintain my smile. What?" he said, looking at me. "I'll help you load her things," I said. "Give me a couple of minutes to take a shower and change into dry clothes while you figure out what you can pick up first." He looked at me curiously and then smiled. "Damn, you're good," he said. "Probably one of the best I've ever seen." "Best at what?" I asked. "Liar," he said, looking me straight in the eyes. "I'm not lying," I barked. "I'll really help you move her things. I just need to take a shower. I just ran 10 miles. "You run 10 miles every morning except Friday, Saturday, and Sunday," he said. "You have a day off on Friday. You only run 5 miles on Saturday, so you have more energy for whatever you and Sarah do that day. You have a long run on Sunday when you're training for a marathon. I'm not saying that you won't help me prepare to move your wife's things out of your house. I'm sure you will do this and more. I'm talking about your feelings. You're even lying to yourself. You're so good at it that you almost believe yourself. For the future, you need to work on your eyes," he continued. "They are the ones who give you away. You have a perfectly practiced fake smile, but when you came closer to me, I saw all the pain you feel written in your eyes. She hurt you a lot, didn't she? Well, this situation was quite confusing from the very beginning. Maybe it's time to end this. Why don't we go to that terrace she always told me about? You can bring me a beer and get yourself some Pepsi or the apple juice you love so much." I just looked at him strangely. "Come on, Bill, we need to discuss this. Trust me, I know what it's like to lose your wife. I lost mine to cancer almost 6 years ago, and it still hurts. I didn't come for Sarah's things. She doesn't even know I'm here. I came to talk to you and understand what happened to you and her." I looked at him even stranger. I couldn't believe his audacity to just come to my house to talk about something that didn't concern him, especially since his sister and I weren't married. "Why do you call Sarah my wife?" I asked. "We are not married. We are not in a romantic relationship." He looked at me and started laughing. It was not a quick chuckle or a scornful laugh. It was full-fledged laughter from the heart, to the point of colic. "Yes," he said when he could calm down. "She told me the same thing. You should know that it's not her fault. She received bad advice from someone who used to be her friend. But my sister is susceptible to such things, given that everything is quite confused in her head. It is your fault. I hope that you are a man and will admit it after our conversation, and it will take time. Years of grudges will not disappear overnight. Wait a minute, I said. I never hurt your sister. I never hit her, shouted at her, or swore at her. No, I didn't offend you, he said. In fact, you almost killed her with kindness. This makes everything even worse, doesn't it? What the hell are you talking about? I asked. I didn't understand what he was talking about. I think I understand everything, he said. It's all about power, isn't it? Or maybe it's a facade of strength, right? The only time someone needs to be this strong is when they think they are weak. They project an aura of invincibility because they don't want to get hurt again. It didn't start with my sister, did it? Someone hurt you before you even met her, and it ruined your whole marriage with my sister. And now recent events have caused her to do something stupid that has put your strange marriage in jeopardy. Why do you keep calling it marriage? I asked. Because, Bill, that's exactly what it is, he said. Now let's go out onto the terrace and start talking. We need to get to the bottom of this before you both do something even more stupid. And I like my beer cold. You'd probably be better off bringing two. This all foreshadows a conversation for 2 beers. As we walked through the house, he looked around and smiled, noticing details. I noted that he seemed to know the history of some of the things Sarah and I had picked up on our travels. My collection of swords and weapons did not surprise him at all. He seemed to have expected this. There are no pistols, right? He said with a smile. I'll go take a shower, I said. The kitchen is there, and the door to the terrace is there. You can get your own beer. I know, he said. You only have Dos Equis. You don't always drink beer. Hell, you don't drink at all, but you just love those damn commercials. Sarah told me. It's one of the things she loves about you the most. I knew what he was going to say, but I ignored it. I had other thoughts. Like, why am I even going to talk to him? Sure, he's Sarah's brother, but it's over between Sarah and me. I wonder if he knew what his sister did. I wonder if he knew how easily she threw away everything we had. As the warm water of the shower poured over me, I was forced to push aside the memory of how, just a few days ago, Sarah and I stood in that shower together, tenderly touching each other under the same warm water. She turned her back to me and leaned over, looking at me over her shoulder. It's a pity that you're so tired after your run. She began. Otherwise we could. Before she finished her sentence, I was in it. Her smile was tinged with sadness that only we understood, but it was only for a moment. What will we do today? She asked. It's your turn to choose, I answered. I shook my head and pushed the memory away. I'll never do that again, and her brother was waiting for me downstairs. I turned off the shower and got dressed in casual clothes. Passing through the kitchen on my way to the terrace, I picked up a small bowl of fruit salad that Sarah had prepared 2 days ago. I smiled again, remembering last summer when we literally lived on fruit, cold cuts, and soda. I sat down at the table opposite Bobby. You and Sarah have a beautiful house, he said. You know, even though Sarah doesn't officially live here, she considered this place her home. I rolled my eyes. Her apartment is almost empty. She gave most of the furniture to my daughter when Emily moved into her apartment 2 years ago. I don't even understand why she went there when her heart was here. You and she really need to work on your acting skills. Everything in this house is saturated with her presence. There are as many photographs of her as there are of yours. All her favorite foods are in your refrigerator. And as her brother, I really didn't want to see her panties drying in your laundry room. Why can't you just admit it? Admit that? I asked. We were friends, nothing more. She worked for me, and we spent time together. Okay, we spent a lot of time together, but there was nothing between us. He just looked at me with that almost psychic look of his. Okay, Bobby, we're both adults, right? Your sister and I were, friends with benefits, but she decided to go a different route. That happens. We got along great and met each other's certain needs. We all have those needs, and since none of us had anyone in our lives, well, you know. Yes, I understand, he said, smiling. I know you were both deceiving yourselves. You were basically fooling yourself, and she was putting up with it. This was one of the worst forms of abuse you inflicted on her. and in the end, it was part of what made her snap. Bill, you're an attractive guy. You have a successful business and more money than you need. You could easily find yourself a woman, and you might find someone more beautiful than my sister. You see, he smiled, looking at me. When I said that you could find someone more beautiful than my sister, you got angry. Your lips even twitched, but your eyes told me that you wanted to kick my ass for those words. He laughed again. You'll be even angrier at me, Bill, for what I'm about to say, he said. You love Sarah. That's why everything is so confusing. No, I don't, I said loudly. You don't love me, he echoed sarcastically. What, are you 6 years old? Don't get me wrong, Bill. My sister is not ugly. She is an attractive woman, especially if you like thicker women. She has a big ass and very nice breasts, but her waist is narrow. If you like an hourglass figure, then she's your girl. But it's more than that to you, isn't it, Billy? Despite all your protests and talk about friends with benefits, you love my sister, don't you? No, I don't, we both said at the same time, which caused another fit of laughter from him. Okay, Bill, let's get started, he finally said. Tell me what you experienced before meeting Sarah. Let's hear the story of why you put my sister through all this hell for the last 5 years. He looked at me as if he really expected me to just tell him everything. I never told anyone how I messed up my first marriage or why I decided never to get married again. But something in his eyes made me want to spill it all. Maybe if I can talk about this just once, it will help clear my mind of some of this crap. Maybe this will give me a new understanding of what I'm doing wrong that caused not one, but 2 women to cheat on me. Sarah. I woke up and reached out to Bill with a smile on my face. I had a terrible dream. I dreamed that we broke up. In fact, we couldn't break up because we weren't officially together. But the truth was that I loved Bill Reed more than life itself and wanted to have his children. Suddenly, I realized where I was and why, and I started crying again. We really broke up. After the best 5 years of my life, I had screwed up so badly that I couldn't see a way to fix it. I knew how Bill felt about betrayal. I knew what he did to his first wife, and I knew that since we weren't even married, I couldn't hope for what she got. She received expulsion from his life without the right to pardon. My tears streamed down my face and hurt. The salt from the tears, which had dried the day before, irritated the skin, and a new stream of tears again caused pain. There was a knock on the door, and it woke me up. I went to the door, hoping it was Bill. When I opened the door and saw Teresa, my face hardened, and I began to close the door in her face. Damn, you look terrible, she said. In any case, I need your help. Teresa was never known for her tact. She pushed past me into the apartment. You should really rent this place out, she said. There is almost no furniture here. How often do you come here anyway? What do you need, Terry? I asked in a cold tone. Haven't you hurt me enough yet? Did you just come to shoot me and put me out of my misery? She looked at me as if I had fallen out of a stupid tree and hit every branch on the way down. Have you told him yet? She asked. How can I? I sobbed. He doesn't want to talk to me. You probably shouldn't have listened to me, she said sharply. Anyway, we have a big problem. You ruined my little brother's life, and he's depressed. You have to help me fix this. I looked at her as if she was crazy. How is this my fault? I asked. I didn't say it was your fault. I said you need to help me. Well, indirectly, it's your fault, she continued. You were so unhappy that I had to try to help you. So I came up with an idea that probably wasn't a good one, but it was your misfortune that caused this, so even though it was my plan, you share the responsibility. Somewhere in all of this, I lost the thread. My brother's friend Frankie got a visit from one of Billy's private investigators, she said. They told her that Frankie had ruined the relationship by having sex, or possibly more than one sex, with another woman. This woman, naturally, is you. She was so angry with Frankie that she called off their engagement. Since Frankie worked, and maybe still works, for her father, he was fired. Now he has lost his girlfriend and his job for no reason. We must help him. What do you want me to do? I asked. Well, you could talk to her and tell her the whole story, Terry said. You could too, I said. I'm sorry about your brother, but I'm just not in the mood to leave here. I may never leave here again. She doesn't believe me. She doesn't love me at all. Anyway, Sarah, we'll find you another guy, she said. We'll find you someone better, someone who doesn't have all of Bill's complexes. Terry, just get your obsessive ass out of my apartment now, I snapped at her. Damn, sorry, she said. What is it about this guy that makes you hold on to him so much? Just go away, Terry, I told her. As she ran out and slammed the door behind her, I remembered the first time I met Bill Reed. It was 5 years ago on the Woodward Dream Cruise. The Woodward Dream Cruise is truly an amazing experience. It's like a car show driving through the heart of Detroit. To be clear, the Dream Cruise does not take place in Detroit. This is a completely suburban event that starts ridiculously less than 50 yards from the Detroit city limits and continues all the way to Pontiac, Michigan. You can see any and every type of vehicle passing by. There are all kinds of incredible cars, trucks, motorcycles, and oddities. One guy even rode a motorized toilet the first year I was there. In any case, I did not participate in the Dream Cruise event itself. Each small town and suburb along the route has its own events and exhibitions. Ferndale, Michigan has some of the best. It's called Mustang Alley, and it's a huge show and competition exclusively for Mustangs. 3 years before this show, my father died. His death, shortly after my brother Bobby lost his wife and I got divorced, was devastating. My dad left Bobby a house and me a broken '67 Mustang and some money. I decided to sell the car to find out how much I could get for it and just leave. At least that was the plan. I looked at this car and remembered how much my father loved it. The '67 Shelby GT 500 Mustang was rare. I wondered why my father didn't leave the car to Bobby and the house to me. Instead of selling the car, I decided to restore it. Somewhere along the way, I started to love the car too. The guys who restored the car came up with a plan to turn it into a GT 500E. When I saw their designs, I knew it was perfect, and my Elena was born. That Dream Cruise was her debut and mine too. During the last 24 months it took to restore the car, with me involved in most of the work, I experienced most of my personal tragedies. I saw my dad in the car every time I looked at it, and I knew he would have loved what I did to it. I also saw that my ex-husband had found a new victim. Even when he held her hand possessively in the market where I saw them, I saw clear signs of his love in the bruises on her arms and the thick layer of makeup on her face. Better for her than for me, I thought. I dated a few guys, but didn't feel anything special until that day on the cruise. From the first second I put Elena in her place, I had people, mostly guys, looking at her. Since there weren't usually many women at these shows other than car show models and sharks looking for men who could afford a toy car, I got a lot of attention too. Most of the guys who approached me were either those who wanted my car and thought that if they climbed into bed with me, they would drive it, or those who already had their own car and thought it would be cool to have a woman with her own car. Neither type attracted me. I wasn't naive even then. At 32 years old, I had already been through this several times and knew what I didn't want in a man. This time, if I go around in circles again, it will be for someone who truly loves me and makes me feel good. My first husband was selfish. He often told me that I wasn't pretty enough and that I should be happy to be with him no matter what he did. My ass was too big, and since I'm in my 30s, my breasts would soon be on the floor. I was also too short and my legs were too thick. After 10 years of such words, I must admit, he achieved his goal and I believed in it. I wish I could say that I was strong and immediately escaped from this situation, but I can't. I put up with it much longer than I should have. But when I decided to leave, I did it quickly and decisively. So I was on the cruise. I sat next to Elena, wearing the t-shirt I'd bought on the cruise that morning and my favorite old, too tight jeans. I stood up from my folding chair for a second to get something to eat. When I returned, I saw this guy walking back and forth on both sides of the exhibition. He took pictures of all the cars. He also talked to almost every car owner. I thought he was cute and couldn't wait for him to come up to me and take Ellie's photo. I put on my sunglasses and struck one of my most seductive poses to wait. It didn't take long. He walked up to the car next to mine, a very nice 2010 V6 convertible in custom red with a contrasting interior. This guy was cool. Just by listening to him talk to the owner of the car, I realized that he just loves Mustangs. He was not a snob, he liked all Mustangs. He loved the V6 as much as their more powerful brethren and appreciated all eras of the pony car. I loved his voice and the enthusiasm he brought to talk about the cars we both loved. In the last 5 years of my marriage, I don't think I've ever been aroused. I think it got to the point where I just tolerated it. So it came as a shock to me that listening to this guy talking to the 60-year-old man who owned that red Mustang made me horny. I heard him thank the man for the conversation and shake his hand, and then I saw him walk towards me and pass by. To say that I was crushed is an understatement. It just didn't make any sense. I tried to understand why he ignored me. I looked across the road and saw him talking to a guy who had a cool black and red GT from the early 90s. It was a nice car, but not as rare or cool as my Elena. I decided that there was no reason why he should have let me through, and I got angry. I walked back to the kiosk halfway down the street to get something to drink. To hell with it, I thought. Before I could leave, he must have headed straight for my car. He photographed her from almost every angle. Several times I saw him stop and shake his head. Just by the way he looked at my car, I was jealous. I headed back from the food stand and saw him leave and start talking to the guy on the other side again. I have an idea. I grabbed the hand of a guy walking down the street. "Where is your car?" I asked him. He looked at me in surprise. "I don't have a car on this show," he said. "But God, I wish I could. As soon as I find a job, I'll buy myself a Mustang." "Great," I said. "I'm sure Ford will be happy. How would you like to approach girls? Maybe you'll have a better chance of getting a car with a girlfriend." He looked at me, then smiled. "Not with me," I said quickly. "You need someone younger and more beautiful." "What should I do?" he asked. "Do you see the car there?" I pointed to my Elena. "I just need you to stand next to this car for a moment. There is a chair there. Sit on the chair. If someone comes up and asks you about the car, tell them it's your car, but your sister was looking after it." He nodded and sat down next to Ellie. It took less than 20 seconds. As soon as he sat down, Bill immediately approached him. I was sure he had a lot of questions for this guy. On the one hand, I felt better. This confirmed my theory that my car was really special and beautiful, so I was happy. On the other hand, I wondered what was wrong with me that a guy I didn't even know disliked me so much that he ignored me to avoid me. Billy. I looked at Bobby. He took a long sip of his beer and laughed at me. He burped loudly and looked at my bowl. "Melon, honeydew melon, pineapple, green grapes, and cherries are one of her favorite salads," he said. "She even taught you what she likes." "Okay, we don't have all day. Let's listen to the story of why you don't love your wife. That is, my sister." "All right," I said. "It all started when I was 24. I met this girl at a party after work. Her name was Irene, and somehow we immediately liked each other. We started dating and got married. We had a great life, or so I thought. At first, we did everything together. We almost never parted. She was everything to me. But over time, I think, like most couples, we somehow settled down. Everything was no longer new and fresh. In fact, everything had become quite boring. I think our marriage was like most things in life. You spend all your time and energy to get something. And then when you get it, you get used to it. And pretty soon, it's not as important as it used to be. Over time, Irene also calmed down. Don't get me wrong, we still loved each other, but maybe we were just getting used to each other. It was probably my fault because I looked at my life and my marriage and thought I didn't have everything I deserved. I was especially disappointed with how Irene turned out. Irene was very nice when we met. She was small and thin. She was like an elf. But over the years, she has gained several kilograms. She wasn't built like Sarah, so she didn't look overweight. On the other hand, she simply did not care about her appearance. She didn't do anything to her hair, so she just cut it short for convenience. And when she turned 30, she began wearing huge, ugly glasses. She wasn't really unattractive, she was just unkempt. I think she thought we already had each other, and there was no one left to impress. We were comfortable with each other. Maybe that's what made everything boring. Actually, when I think about it, our life wasn't bad at all, it was just boring. And looking back, I was at least 50% to blame for this. Maybe if I had spent more time with Irene or been more interested in her, things would have been different. But I didn't do that, so everything remained as it was. You know what they say, the grass is always greener somewhere else. So, this green grass is partly to blame for the destruction of my marriage. During those times, I worked hard to attract new clients for my business. Everywhere I went, if I saw or heard about someone who could be a potential client, I immediately approached them. At the same time, I was still the same guy as before. I was still in touch with many of my friends from college and high school. One of my best friends at the time was James Kirk. Kirk and I played baseball in junior league and in high school. As we got older, we used to go pick girls out together. Kirk was married and divorced 3 times by age 28. Kirk was a notorious womanizer. Anyway, Kirk and I were having lunch and reminiscing about old times at one of the outdoor cafes near my office when I first saw her. When she entered the cafe, all the men in the room followed her with their gaze. Like most of these guys, I was fascinated. Rebecca was just amazing in the strangest way. She wasn't one of those 20-something blonde, Scandinavian goddess, swimsuit models with a stunning figure and piercing blue eyes. In fact, she was almost the opposite of that. She was kind of cute in a girl next door kind of way. She had short brown hair that was styled inwards. Her breasts were not large or even average, and she was several years older than me. She was probably 36 or 37 years old, maybe even older, but she looked that age. But there was something in her smile and gait that attracted everyone's attention. She had this way where her eyes would be half open, half closed, and she would just scan the room, smiling at every man there. But every man thought that she was smiling only at him. If I had known then what I know now, everything would have been different. I would throw money on the table and leave from there. Anyway, that day she sat down for lunch with one of her friends and an obsession was born. I started having lunch at this cafe every day to see her. Without ever speaking to her, I fell head over heels in love with the image I had created in my head. Rebecca was, in my mind, the woman I was supposed to marry. She was perfect and pure, but in the bedroom, I was sure that, being awakened, she behaved like an ideal prostitute. I always stayed in the back of the cafe, hoping that she wouldn't notice me. I watched her for 6 months before I really went crazy. I came up with all possible fantasy scenarios about how we would meet. I imagined what she would say and how she would behave. I acted like a 15-year-old girl with her first love. The only thing missing was a notebook in which I would write our names and draw hearts around them. Part of the reason I couldn't do it was because I didn't know her name. So every day I sat there, watching my perfect princess and imagining what our life together would be like. And every night I returned home to a woman who I was simply tired of and with whom I was bored. Irene has never done anything wrong. In fact, her only mistake was not being Rebecca. Suddenly she became too short for me. Her legs were not so long. Her hair was not dark enough and styled incorrectly. Nothing she wanted to talk about interested me. And of course, none of this was her fault. It was all about me and my imagination. Kirk and I were having lunch again, and he noticed my interest. "She's a trickster," he said. "What?" I asked. "She's the kind of woman you could have for a while if you wanted," he told me. Then he told me to watch her carefully. One guy walked past her desk and dropped something. I couldn't tell if it was a napkin, a folded piece of paper, or a business card, but she looked at it and picked it up, putting it in her purse. "You know what?" he said. "Your birthday is coming up. I'm going to find out something about her." Before I could say anything, Kirk walked up to their table. Without any preamble or introduction, Kirk went on the attack. He walked straight over to their table and sat down next to Rebecca. He pushed her away as if she was bothering him and stared straight into her friend's eyes. Rebecca's friend, whom I later came to know as Bonnie, was an interesting woman. On paper, she was much prettier than Rebecca and better built. She was also younger and prettier, but she always seemed out of place next to Rebecca. Rebecca seemed to radiate a sex appeal that transcended her physical beauty and made most of the women around her simply disappear in comparison. Kirk somehow sensed this and went straight to the problem. He grabbed Bonnie's hand and stared into her beautiful blue eyes. She was so amazed that Kirk ignored Rebecca, which was rare, that she would do anything he wanted. She gave Kirk her phone number on the spot and agreed to meet him that evening. As Kirk returned to our table with a smile, I noticed Rebecca's laser gaze directed at him and then at me. She smiled at me from across the room, and I was even more hooked, although I didn't fully understand what was going on. The next day, Kirk came into my office, even though he didn't work for me, and told me all about Rebecca. He told me her name and that, believe it or not, she was 40 years old. She was also married and very unhappy in her marriage, and yes, she cheated on her husband, and often. I couldn't believe she was 40, but I didn't care. I couldn't believe she was married, but in the end, I didn't care, and I was sure that she had good reasons for cheating. I was sure that as soon as we were together, she would stop. It's funny that Kirk had this idea that I just wanted to have a quickie with Rebecca, and after I did that I'd go back to my marriage happy and content, and he was even more sure that Rebecca was, as he called her, a player. After he learned all the information about her, he always spoke about her with some disdain. I think in his mind she was just an easy girl to get. On the other hand, I still saw her as my fairy princess. I began to come up with all the scenarios for our acquaintance and rapprochement. I imagined how I would take her away from her husband, whom I imagined as a rude freak who did not deserve her. The only problem with my ideal fantasy of living with Rebecca was that I had to find a way to remove Irene from the equation. Sarah. So, when I saw Bill approach the guy who was sitting next to my car, I got angry. The closer I got, the funnier the situation became. Bill asked the guy all sorts of questions that he simply couldn't answer. Is this an original model or a restored one? Bill asked the guy. This is a Mustang, the guy said proudly. What engine does it have? Asked Bill. Chrome-plated, the guy said. I walked up behind Bill and tapped him on the shoulder. This is a '67 Shelby GT500, but it was not originally an Elainer model. All of the conversion parts and body kit were made by Shelby, so in that respect, it can be considered original. But since only 2 Elainer models were actually made by Shelby, it cannot be considered an original. The engine is a modular V8 from Ford Racing. It produces 428 horsepower. He just looked at me with his gray-green eyes and nodded, then turned away. Hey, wait a minute, I said. I answered your question. Now answer mine. He simply nodded. What are you doing? I asked. Every year when I bring my car to the show, it's my Grabber Orange 09 GT over there. Anyway, I always take pictures of all the cars at the show. I ask questions to learn about modifications I might want to make to my car and about cars I might want to buy. Are you into men? I asked him. Or do you just not like ugly, plump girls? I'm not into men, he said. But I can't say that I like ugly, plump girls. Do you know someone like that so I can understand what an ugly, chubby girl looks like? Well, people like me, I said. He just laughed at me then. You're not ugly at all, he said, and your waist is too small to be plump. You just have a lot of goodies. Most of the guys here today will be looking at your genes. Then why? I began. There's just no room for women in my life anymore, he said. I mean, they're good, but there's too many problems with them. They're like Lamborghinis. They're nice to look at, but they're just not practical. Who wants a car where you have to pay more to replace the brakes than you would for a down payment on another car? He shrugged his shoulders. Maybe it's not a matter of practicality, he continued. I appreciate them, but I just don't want to own them. When he said beautiful, he looked straight at me. Thank you for telling me about your car, he said softly. This is probably the best car here. When he turned to leave, something told me that this was the man with whom I would spend the rest of my life. Just looking at him and listening to his voice, I was fascinated. "Hey baby, can we go get something to eat now?" asked my unemployed security guard. "Go straight ahead," I said. "But I thought we had something," he said. "Maybe we could go for a ride later." "Don't flatter yourself," I said. "Is it because I don't have a camera?" he asked. I just shrugged. Damn, as rappers always say. These bitches are crazy. He walked away, turned around, and continued walking. I spent the rest of the day watching Billy as he walked back and forth around the exhibit. He must have taken at least one photo, and probably more, of each of the more than 600 Mustangs on display. His own car was a delight. It was a 2009 Mustang GT, heavily modified. It had black racing stripes and glossy black grills. The upper and lower radiator grills were made of black aluminum. It had a black splitter that matched the stripes and contrasted with the orange paint. It had a black rear diffuser. Even the wheels on the car were a very glossy black color with a split 5-spoke design. Its engine was all chrome with black parts. His shaker hood intake system was the first I've seen. The functional air intake surprised me. A black air intake rose through an opening in its hood. The spark plug wires were the same orange color as the car body. His car also made more horsepower than my Alina. I had no doubt that she was probably faster. One of the things that amazed me the most was that even under the car, everything I saw was black, orange, or chrome. I was sure I was in love. I watched him throughout the morning, and he didn't pretend or play hard to get. He avoided women, for the most part. He even avoided those yummy model girls at the Ford booth and all the other vendor booths. I noticed that although he was cold towards all women from 18 to 60 years old, he was a real angel towards little girls and very old women. It took me a while to realize it, but someone had to hurt him badly for him to become like this. During the day, I acted like a fool with him. I invited him to eat with me, and he refused. But then I realized something. If I told him something that was entirely related to machines and not related to communication, he agreed. For example, when I told him that Ford mechanics were running dyno tests on some of the cars they modified, his eyes lit up. He even let me take his hand and lead him to the parking lot where they were working. Later that day, I told him the prize drawing was starting, and I took his hand again. He didn't mind. I won one of the prizes in the raffle. I didn't win anything cool like custom wheels or engine modifications. I won dinner for two at one of the upscale restaurants in Pontiac. "Oh, this is perfect," I said. "I can throw this away." "I thought you'd like it," he said. "Why?" I asked sharply, turning away from him and smiling. "I am divorced. It's just me and Alina. I don't want to deal with these guys here, and I don't go on dates. My ex-husband was enough to make me never do it again." "I know how you feel," he said. I played it right. I look stupid going there alone. I will seem like the biggest loser in the world. Oh, look at her. She couldn't even invite anyone with her. "I'm sure there are a lot of guys here who will go with you," he said. "Yes, fool, I know," I said, "but they already have the wrong idea. What most of these guys don't understand is that I love my car as much as they do. They think I'm here because I'm desperate to get the guy. If I also offer one of them dinner, he will think that he can automatically put me to bed. The 4 biggest questions you got today. #1 How much horsepower does your engine have? What kind of wheels do you have? Is this a supercharger? And is this the factory color? Am I right?" He smiled and nodded. "There were a couple more questions, but it's close," he said. "Do you know what questions I had?" He shook his head. "Is this the original Alina? What size bra are you? Is this your boyfriend's car? You have a boyfriend?" He laughed when I said this. "Why do you get all the questions about your car, and I get all the questions about dating that have nothing to do with my car? I just want to meet a nice guy who would be just a friend without romantic or sexual innuendo. Maybe just someone to do things with sometimes who doesn't want or need to try to get into my panties. Hell, it would be nice to just take our cars, go to this restaurant, have dinner in good company, and then maybe drive around the city a little at night and go home. At first, I thought I had gone too far. My heart was beating so hard that my chest was shaking. It seemed like an eternity before he spoke again. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sarah Jensen," I said. "Bill Reed," he extended his hand. "If you just want a friend without any romantic innuendos or pressure, I could be your friend." We spent time together until the early evening, and then went to dinner at a restaurant. The dinner was truly magical, and the conversation was wonderful. But I already knew that this would happen. Bill paid for any additional costs that were not covered by the tickets I won. By the end of the evening, he was looking down, and I felt like he wanted to ask me something. "Come on," I said. "I see that you want to ask something." I was hoping he would say he liked it and ask if we could do it again someday. If he didn't, I was going to. I'd rather make a fool of myself than risk losing him before I actually have him. "What size is your bra?" he asked. "You really want to know how big my breasts are, right?" I barked. Then she noticed that he was smiling. "Okay, liar, what do you really want to ask?" I smiled too. "Okay," he said, "but this is a rather personal question." I just nodded. "On the way back, can we change cars?" he asked, looking down at the table. I started laughing. So I thought that he wanted to take me somewhere more private, but he just wanted to get into the driver's seat of my car, not mine. By the end of the night, we exchanged phone numbers, and we became friends in a sense. In the first days, I called him much more often than he called me, but we got off to a good start. Bill. The answer came to me suddenly. Kirk, he can do it. Kirk was, as I mentioned, a real womanizer. He loved to pursue women who seemed unattainable to him. He was often rejected, but he also achieved a lot. I called him, invited him to lunch, and outlined my idea. "You are crazy," he asked. "Why should I do this?" "As if you were doing me a favor," I replied. "Aren't you going crazy, Bill?" he asked. He tilted his head and looked at me. "You're not turning into one of those weird dudes on the internet who gets horny when someone sleeps with their wife, are you? You know, guys like that, they're all really crazy. They claim that they see it as proof of love for their women and all that." "No, Kirk," I said. "These guys are just genetic dead ends. They don't have the viable traits to reproduce, and they realize it, so they help the gene pool by letting the best specimen try to impregnate its female. In short, they're losers and don't want to pollute society, so they don't reproduce, though accidents happen. It will take several generations to get rid of them, but they are doomed." "So what's the point?" he asked. "Kirk, I'm tired of being married to her," I said. "And there's someone else I want, but I couldn't change Irene if my life depended on it. But if she cheated first, then I'd just settle the score. And if she cheats on me with you, I won't. I'll have to worry about losing her. I don't think you've ever slept with the same woman more than once or twice in your entire life." Suddenly, Kirk ducked in his chair. He sank so low that he was almost under the table. I looked back and noticed that Rebecca and Bonnie had just entered the restaurant. "What happened to you?" I asked him. Bill, I've slept with Bonnie 3 or 4 times," he whispered. "Now this bitch thinks she's mine. She keeps calling and trying to get me to meet her family." I just laughed. As I looked across the room to see if Bonnie was looking our way, I noticed Rebecca's eyes were directed at me, and she smiled. "Who is this woman who turned you on like this?" he asked, still crouching under the table. "I'd rather not talk," I said. "Hey, they sat them in another room. You can get out." "Please tell me it's not that brown-haired bitch," he chuckled. "Please tell me you won't risk your marriage for her." "She's not what you think, Kirk," I said. "And how do you know this?" he asked. The look he gave me was the same look mothers get when their children say something so stupid that it defies classification. "I've done my research," I said. "Okay, I'll do it," he said, "but only to save your ass." Things happened very slowly over the next few weeks. Kirk tried to randomly meet Irene several times in places like the supermarket and even at our house, pretending that he had something to give me. For a master of seduction, his success was surprisingly low. After several such meetings, Irene just told me that there was something wrong with him, and she didn't want him hanging around our house. Damn it, Kirk, I said. I thought you were a man. I can't believe you failed. I didn't completely fail, man, he said. She's just tougher than most women. Come on, go ahead, I said sharply. The thought that his failure was preventing me from having the life I dreamed of with Rebecca really irritated me. In the meantime, I was working on other things. I needed to know as much as I could about Rebecca so that our life together could be better. I also knew that just seeing her on the side wasn't enough for me. Even though Kirk thought I just wanted to sleep with her and then go back to Irene, I had other plans. In my mind, Rebecca and I were lovers, like Romeo and Juliet. I wanted us to be together forever. This meant that I needed to free her from this scoundrel of a husband who was making her miserable. To this end, I hired a very discreet private detective to follow Rebecca's husband and collect dirt on him that I could use to divorce her. I met him in his office the day after I spoke with Kirk. The private detective looked exactly like you'd expect. He had bags under his eyes and had not shaved for several days. He had a small belly and wore wrinkled clothes. The funny thing was that he was only about 20 years old. Bags under the eyes appeared from playing games on Xbox at night. A belly because, like many kids these days, he didn't exercise and was too lazy to shave. I put a couple of my best people on it, he said. By changing them, he's less likely to notice or remember them. I nodded my head. That's why you charge me so much for surveillance, right? I asked. He smiled at me with yellow teeth while eating his ass. The more I looked at this guy, the more convinced I became that if Rebecca and I ever had kids, I wouldn't buy them a video game console. Or at least I will strictly limit the time they spend on it. His teeth were so yellow, it looked like he ate butter sandwiches for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know why you wanted us to follow this guy, he said. He's boring. He doesn't do anything. He works as a mechanic at an auto body shop. He has a certificate from a very good program. He does a great job. His boss and all his clients love him. I have hours of video of him. In fact, we found one time he could have gotten into trouble. When I heard this, I started drooling. I adopted a wolfish grin because I knew he was going to tell me something that I could use, and it would all be worth it. Let me guess, I said. Does he drink at work? No, said the detective. Is he taking medication? I said. No, said the guy. Is he stealing from his boss? I asked. Well, in a way, he said. There was a woman who came in to fix her car and didn't have all the money she needed. He just took what she had and paid the rest out of his own pocket. So, in a way, he underpaid her, but really didn't steal. When he told his boss about it, the boss gave him back some of the money. But that's the worst thing he did. And at home, I asked, how does he feel about his wife? He worships the ground she walks on, the detective answered. She's the one you have to pay us to keep an eye on. Okay, pay me for a couple more weeks and keep an eye on her, I said. I thought maybe they could at least give me information about her preferences so we could get closer. Sarah. My first year with Bill was really interesting. It was like being back in third grade. In third grade, girls knew that some boys were nice, but all the boys thought girls were mean. I often called Bill to go to various car shows and Mustang events. He was usually happy that I called, and we had a great time together. But he very quickly clarified to people that we were just friends. I often got angry when other women tried to get his attention after finding out that we were only friends. But he often used me as a shield when women were too pushy. He came up to me, sat down next to me, and took my hand to get rid of them. I lived for these moments. Another thing that pissed me off was when some guy would follow me around and Bill wouldn't be jealous. I wasn't even sure that anything would ever happen for us until the end of summer came. I was really dreading the end of summer because I thought I would lose Bill then. In Michigan, very few serious motorists drive their cars in the winter. Snow, ice, dew, humidity, all this is terrible for cars. I was probably planning on riding Ellie until it snowed, but Bill just looked at me like I was crazy. He reminded me that Ellie's frame and underbody are not powder-coated, so temperature changes and dew can cause rust. To be honest, I loved Ellie, but I didn't think it through. Bill had been to my apartment several times, and I had also been to his house by that time. I often went to Bill's house to wash Ellie because Bill had all the car care products. I also just wanted to see him. Therefore, after our conversation about what to do with Ellie for the winter, I decided to go see him. I could always tell it was because of the car. When I arrived at his house, he was cleaning out the other side of his garage. Bill had a 3-car garage and owned 2 Mustangs. He had a Jeep that he drove in the winter and his Mustangs. He used a third of the garage to store tools and a lawnmower and for storage. I couldn't understand why he was removing the third part. He was moving all the things from the third area to the barn he had just built. In fact, the barn was not yet completed. He still needed to install the roof and doors. When I arrived, he stopped cleaning the garage. "Glad you're here," he said. "I really need help." I was very glad to hear this from him. They said it would take a couple of people to install this thing, and they weren't kidding. I was able to do most of it myself. Took a couple days off. He smiled at me. "You can afford it when you're the boss." "What should I do?" I asked. "I need you to go inside, change into my sweatpants, and help me finish setting up this thing," he said. That sounds suspicious," I said. I had all sorts of scenarios in my head where he walked into the room while I was changing, and I dropped what I was wearing in mock shock, and he saw me naked. "What will I get in exchange?" I asked. "How about dinner at a restaurant of your choice when we're done? Of course, just as friends," he said. He definitely had to add that to dash my hopes, but it was still progress, and it opened up interesting possibilities for the winter. "I agree," I said. I went to his house and to his bedroom. His house was very neat for a guy living alone. That is until I walked through the living room and kitchen. Apparently, he kept these areas clean for unexpected guests. His office and bedroom were not so neat, which only increased my sympathy for him. Bill was diplomatic again, suggesting sweatpants. I had to roll up the pant legs several times to get them to fit. But if the material wasn't stretchy, I would never have fit into his pants. These pants fit Bill loosely. They also sat loosely on me until they reached my knees, and above that they looked like they had been painted on me. Bill's sweatshirt fit me like a little dress. Even though it was fresh out of the washing machine, there was still a slight scent of Bill on it. It was one of those Mustang shirts from the Ford catalog. I wasn't going to return this shirt. I still sleep in it. He thinks it's because of the Mustang on her, but in reality, it's because she's his. Bill and I spent the rest of that late summer day sunbathing in the waning sun, finishing setting up the shed, and then we moved all his stuff into it. I received 2 big shocks that day. The first was when I went out wearing his clothes. Bill looked at me and his eyes got bigger. It wasn't one of those, "Damn, I didn't know she was that big" looks. I realized that Bill, despite his strange thoughts, actually found me attractive. The second shock came later. After we showered, separately of course, and got dressed, we went to eat at Texas Roadhouse, which turned out to be our favorite steakhouse and Bill's favorite restaurant in general, and we talked. "I'll order the most expensive item on the menu," I said. "You worked me like a slave. Since all I get in return is this dinner, it must be good." "You deserve it," he said. "Seriously, Bill," I said. "We're friends. I would help you for nothing. I just don't understand why we were cleaning and sweeping your garage if we weren't going to put the stuff back in there. Now one side of your garage is just empty space." He looked at me very strangely. "What?" I said. "Do you trust me?" he asked. I thought, "Of course I trust you, idiot. I trust you more than anyone in the world, except maybe my brother. Why would I put up with your antics if I didn't trust you?" But I didn't say that, of course. I pretended to think about it. "I know what I want to ask sounds strange since we don't know each other that well," he said. I couldn't help myself. I started smiling. I was sure where this was going. He wanted to take me somewhere for the weekend, and I was sure that we would end up in bed. I made another big show of thinking about it. I didn't want him to think I was easy, but I really loved him. Plus, we're not teenagers anymore. We are both in our 30s and have both been married before. There was no need for games and nonsense. If we want each other, I don't see a problem. If he wanted a no-strings-attached relationship, I was sure it would eventually develop into something more. And then he shocked me. "Think about it before you say no," he said. I nodded. "Your garage is terrible," he said. "It's not heated, so you can't control the temperature. It's dusty, it's not insulated, there are cracks in the walls, and I'm sure the roof leaks. I don't want her to spend the whole winter there." "You don't want anyone where?" I asked. I was still confused and waited for him to start talking about us. "Your Elena will be better off in my garage for the winter," he said. "My garage is heated and has its own thermostat. It's completely sealed, and since it's an attached garage, we don't have to open the outside door all winter. It's relatively dust-free, and we can even wash it sometimes in the winter. Don't be mad, but I noticed you didn't have a case for it, so I ordered one too." My head was spinning, and I was a little angry. Now I understand why all these guys get angry at women who tease them and lead them by the nose, and then just kiss them on the cheek goodbye. We were together all day. He kept sneaking glances at my ass and breasts all day. I knew that he wanted me, at least his body definitely wanted me. I don't know how I resisted. It seemed like all I could do was laugh. I was able to do this because I probably spent the whole summer realizing that I really loved Bill. I knew then that despite his strange thoughts, I loved him, and maybe it was his way of telling me that he loved me too. So, while I pretended to think about his offer, which I already knew I would accept, I wondered whether I should continue pursuing Bill. He treated me better all summer than my husband did in the entire time we were together. I also wanted him badly. Even if we remained just friends, he was definitely worth chasing. Even my brother often remarked that he had never seen me as happy as I was this summer. Besides, if Bill hadn't suggested that I keep Alina with me, I'd have had to come up with something myself. I needed an excuse for us to continue seeing each other in the fall and winter. What could be better than just checking your car? "That's a really good idea," I said hesitantly. "But—" I began. Bill shook his head and placed the key on the table and slid it towards me. "Here is the key to my house," he said. "That way, you can check on her any time of the day or night you want." I made a valiant attempt to keep my face neutral, nodding slowly. I intended to walk through his house with a comb. Call me nosy or whatever you want, but all women do this. We just need to know everything we can about our men, and whether he wants to admit it or not, Bill was mine. Just friends, damn it. You don't give the key to your house to someone who is just a friend. After that evening, I often called Bill and just stopped by, mostly under the pretext of checking my car. Bill always said there was no need to call ahead. "What if you're on a date with someone?" I asked. "Sarah, you know I don't go on dates," he said. "I am not interested." "Well, what if you have guests?" I asked. He shrugged and looked at the floor. "You are my only friend," he said. His confession was so sad, and from the tone of his voice, I realized that he was telling the absolute truth. It just broke my heart. "I mean, you know, the kind of friends you watch games with, go to the bar or go to the movies with," I said. "I don't drink, so I don't go to bars," he said. "And if I go to the movies, I go alone. I don't have any male friends, Sarah. Men betray just as easily as women, and that hurts too." That told me everything I needed to know. Bill mentioned that he was divorced, and I thought that was why he didn't like women so much. I now realized there was more to it than just a normal divorce, and someone he considered a friend was involved. Perhaps one of his friends testified against Bill during the divorce or had to help him hide some assets and took them for himself. There may have been a car involved because Bill took his cars very seriously. "Bill, I will never betray you," I said in a quiet voice, "and you'll never have to do anything alone." That night set the tone for our future relationship. That night we crossed the first of a series of borders. Over the next few weeks things began to happen, and they moved quickly. It's only been about 10 days since I lost my job. I worked as a secretary for one of the accountants in a medium-sized accounting firm. There was no drama. My boss suffered a heart attack. His doctor suggested he take time off from work or move to a less stressful position. He decided to retire. He passed retirement age several years ago, but continued to work because he loved his job. The company decided not to replace him. They simply distributed his work among the other 10 guys in his position. This left me without a job. I was really upset and turned to the 2 men who were closest to me. My brother expressed sympathy and said that if the bills got too high, I could always move in with him. I thought about it. I knew that since his wife died, he was alone in his house. When I told Bill about it, he just smiled and said, "Texas Roadhouse." I thought he was trying to distract me and cheer me up, and I loved him for it, but he had other plans. While we were eating, he continued to look at his watch. At about 8:30, he called. "Eliza, how are your classes going?" he asked. "This is good." I heard someone talking on the other end of the phone, and Bill continued to eat while listening. He even looked at his watch while he listened, as if he had a set time to listen to her talk. "Well, Eliza," he said, "I've been thinking about you a lot lately." This immediately made me angry. I didn't want him to think about another woman. "I have decided to change my policy, at least for you," he said. "I'm promoting you to sales, even without a degree. Of course, I won't be able to pay you the same base salary as the other salespeople until you graduate in June, but you'll get the same commission as them, and that's it. It will probably be more than you get now." I heard joyful screams from the phone. This Eliza sounded very young, and she was in college too. I became more and more upset every moment. Then he looked at me with a small smile. "My secretary just got promoted to sales," he grinned. "Do you know where I can find a good personal assistant?" I just looked at him with my mouth open. So I started working for Bill. The next shock came in the middle of winter, about a week before Christmas. Bill came out to my side of the office. He handed me the box and smiled. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," he said. "Thanks, Bill," I said. "But why are you giving this to me so early? Christmas is in a week. I didn't even have time to buy you a gift." "You can give it to me when I return," he said. "Bill, where are you going?" I asked. "Sarah, all this Christmas stuff is just making me depressed. I'm cold, I'm lonely, and it's just not fun. So, to not depress everyone else, I'm going on a cruise," he said. "Who are you going with?" I asked immediately. "With no one," he said quietly. He spent the rest of the day making plans and lists of everything he needed. As his personal assistant, I had to organize some of his affairs. Bill did not have a companion in his cabin. He had to book a regular cabin that could sleep 2 people. I decided to lay all my cards on the table. "Bill, how do we get to the airport?" I asked. "I'll drive the Jeep and leave it in the long-term parking lot," he said. "Should I go by car too, or will you pick me up?" I asked. "What are you talking about?" He smiled. "I'm a big boy. I don't need anyone to give me a ride to the airport." "Bill, I'm cold too. I've never been on a cruise, and I don't want to spend Christmas alone. You and I always have a good time together. There's no pressure. It just means we don't have to be alone. I'll give you your money back for the cruise. You can keep my Christmas bonus as a down payment." "But Sarah, there is no cabin available," he said. "I'll share yours," I said. "It's okay, there's enough room." He took a coin out of his pocket and tossed it. "Heads or tails," he said. "Eagle," I shouted. George Washington looked down at us from the floor. He shrugged. "You sleep on the bed the first night," he said. 2 days later, we were on board the ship. Everything was amazing. With the package Bill paid for, everything was included. I was worried because some shops charge you for everything you get after boarding. You have to pay for drinks, and everything costs a fortune. But Bill made sure everything was included. There were some things that we should have been charged for, but we just showed our cabin cards, and they charged it to the room. On the second day, we decided to go on deck and sunbathe. My brother decided to spend the holidays with some of our relatives in another state, and when I called him and told him I was tanning, he was jealous. Jealousy was the theme of the day, apparently. Before we left the cabin, I saw Bill in his long shorts and sandals. I knew he was in good shape, but I didn't realize he was so well built. I knew he ran. I'd seen him do a few races in the summer and fall, but I didn't know he was that muscular. I constantly sucked in my stomach when I was near him. Every time one of the women on the cruise started a routine, I got angry. A routine like this. Some woman on our service staff said, "Your husband is really cute slash attractive slash hot." And I'd say, "He's not my husband," or "We're not married." Bill was getting a lot of attention and I was angry. I even think they told other women because they started harassing Bill a lot. Of course, when we were on deck, I also caught the attention of a lot of guys. Some of them even came to talk to us. We also talked to Bill so as not to be rude. But when they found out we weren't married, they paid a lot of attention to me, and Bill didn't pay attention to it. I remember telling him how much they annoyed me. "You are an attractive woman," he said. "You should expect this." The problem was that Bill simply couldn't see things correctly. Okay, to a lot of guys, I might be attractive. Not for everyone, of course, but for those who love big ass and breasts, I'm their girl. There were two problems with this. The first was that most of these guys didn't want a relationship with me. They didn't want to recognize me. It was that same cruise perception that colored their perception of things. On the ship, everything you need or want is provided for you. All you need to do is just ask, and you will receive it. So they saw big breasts and a nice ass and thought that this was also provided for them. Long story short, all they wanted was to sleep with me. In a week, they won't remember my name or face. The second problem was that I was already another guy's girlfriend, whether he wanted to admit it or not. The nights were even worse. We walked on the deck, and it was so romantic that I wanted to scream. The funny thing was that none of us knew how to dance. So when we got up to dance to one of the slow songs in one of the clubs, it just blew my mind. I looked at all the couples who were dancing, and perhaps Bill saw the longing in my eyes. "Why don't you dance with one of these guys?" he said. "Why don't you dance with me?" I snapped. "Then I won't have to worry about some night lizard grabbing my fat ass or trying to cuddle up to my chest." "If your ass is so fat, why would they want to grab it?" he asked. "And if you're worried about the breasts, just move away from them." "You should be my friend," I said. "Why can't you protect me from such things?" "I cannot dance. I just wanted you to have a good time." "I'm already having a good time," I said, "and I can't dance either." "You know, not all people are the same," he said. "Are we talking about coffins?" I asked. "No, we're talking about you," he said. "I'm starting to get tired of your self-criticism. You're really beautiful. Not all guys like skinny girls intended for us." We walked out onto the dance floor and Bill hugged me. I felt dizzy before we even started moving. As we got closer and our bodies touched, the reaction that had been building up for months just burst out, and we couldn't hold back. I almost lost consciousness from the strength of this feeling. Forget about dancing. I was ready to make love to him right there on the dance floor in front of everyone. He wanted me too. He tried to move away from me, but I was beside myself. Every time he took a step back, I moved closer to him. I wanted to feel him close, even if it was only while dancing. And damn, we had all our uniforms on. What could have happened? I don't think anyone noticed anything. But Bill abruptly took my hand and led me back to our table. "Sorry," he said. "You should probably try dancing with someone who can dance." "Yes," I snapped. My anger was out of control because I wanted him so much, and he just couldn't understand it. Or at least I should have danced with someone who doesn't mind if a fat girl touches him. I left him and headed back to our cabin. Bill. It took much less time than I expected. Barely 3 days after I learned that Rebecca's husband was a good guy, the private investigator called me again. He said he had something for me. I went to his office and he had DVDs and some audio CDs for me. I locked myself in my office and watched a DVD. I saw Rebecca leaving the building where she worked. She got into the car and drove to the bar. She didn't come out right away, but when she did, her skirt was noticeably shorter than when she got into the car. She sat down at a table with several other women, one of whom was Bonnie. Rebecca stood up and began dancing with several men. They all groped her ass and visibly rubbed against her. She didn't seem to mind. After a couple of dances, Rebecca walked out into the parking lot with one of the guys. He drove his car away from the building, and they climbed into the back seat. When they finished, Rebecca repeated this a few more times before driving home. The two other women from her group remained at the table and talked to each other. They both went home before Rebecca. There were several days of the same behavior. There have been worse things. There was one time when Rebecca left the house while her husband was working in the yard. He walked over and kissed her goodbye as she left. She smiled but quickly pulled away after a brief kiss. She drove to the mall and started talking to two large men before going inside. After some time, they went to a hotel together. Rebecca entered the room with two men and did not come out for a long time. During this time, at least 3 other men entered the room. My heart sank as I watched the DVD. Was this the woman I became obsessed with? But still, some part of me wanted to believe that this was not happening. I turned off the DVD in disgust. The CDs contained recordings of her telephone conversations. In one conversation with Bonnie, the two women almost ended their friendship over the phone. Bonnie was upset because a man didn't call her back. Rebecca told her that it was her own fault for allowing herself to be treated this way. "What do you want me to do, Beck?" Bonnie asked. "Became as easily accessible as." "Were you going to call me?" Rebecca asked. "No," Bonnie said. "The easy ones at least do it for the money. The only thing I don't understand is why you treat Johnny this way. He deserves better. If you don't love him, why don't you just tell him? You go out every night and sleep with so many guys, as much as you can hold. And Becky, he loves you so much." "It's none of your business, Bonnie," Rebecca replied sharply. "Maybe I'll let him go one day. He's a good backup, but he just doesn't make enough money to support me the way I need to. Maybe I'll move on to something new soon. I have someone in mind with his own business that may be as obsessed with me as it is with Johnny." "You have a lot of guys who are obsessed with you, and I can't even get Kirk to call me back," Bonnie said. "I'll talk to you later, Beck. I'm going to call him again." Listening to poor Bonnie talk about how my best friend treated her made me feel worse. I blamed myself because Kirk was never interested in her. He just slept with her and used her to get information to help me get to Rebecca. I was also disgusted by the fact that Rebecca was not at all what I had imagined her to be. Kirk had been right about her all along. I felt like a fool. I had a woman at home who loved me so much that no bullshit from Kirk could affect her. She upset him and completely refused him. I was ready to give up years of history and a pearl of a woman for a bitch. Nature has always made the most dangerous plants the most beautiful. I looked for grass that was greener than mine, and I found it. The problem is that the grass is always greener above the septic tank. Grass was the most beautiful green in places where the ground was full of crap. Before throwing them away, I watched the next scene on the DVD. The detective was finally able to install a camera in one of the motel rooms Rebecca was using. It was like a really poorly made adult movie. Rebecca, who did not look as good naked as she did dressed, was like a pincushion. She simply had sex with everyone who approached her, moaning and asking for more. I started feeling nauseous as I watched. I called Kirk and told him to stop trying to get Irene to sleep with him. I told him that I owed it to him, but I decided to take his advice about Rebecca. "I'm glad you finally listened to me," he said. "She's just another bitch. She's not worth ruining your marriage. Now you and Irene just need to calm down and have fat little kids. Name the first one after me, and we're even." "Definitely, buddy," I said, hanging up. I never mentioned to him that I knew about his affair with Rebecca. I thought they deserved each other. "Sarah, everything was going so well. Everything was too perfect. And now I've ruined everything by trying to move too fast. Part of the problem was that I had lied to Bill for so long. I loved him more every damn day. I would never betray him. Hell, after the way my ex treated me, I just couldn't do that to anyone else. And besides, my ex's betrayal greatly affected my consciousness. He was the one who convinced me that I was simply not beautiful enough. But Bill didn't think so, and that was enough. Bill always told me this, both with his words and the way he sneaks glances at me when he thought I wasn't noticing, and of course, by how excited he was when I pressed myself against him. And suddenly, I realized what I needed to do. I had gotten this far by lying, but I was on the verge of losing him. Perhaps one more lie could keep us together. I took a shower, and instead of putting on my usual thick pajamas, I put on the smallest panties I owned and a bra that clearly wouldn't hold my breasts in place. Then I went to bed, even though Bill was supposed to be sleeping in it that night. After a while, he entered the room. He avoided the area around the sofa. He probably thought I was sleeping there, as I should have been. He took off everything except his boxers and froze. In the dark, I could see him looking at the pile of blankets on the couch and shaking his head. He started to walk there, but then returned and lay down on the bed. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" he blurted out. "I'm trying to sleep, and I'm getting more and more angry with you," I answered sharply. "Look, I know I was wrong, but I couldn't help myself," he said. "Did you know it's my turn to sleep in the bed?" "Bill, why are you such an idiot?" I asked. "I thought you were my friend." "I'm your friend," he said. "That's why I was there and tried to dance with you, even though I hate dancing. And guess what? I knew what happened would happen." "Then why did you try?" I asked. "Because you wanted to dance," he said. "And I wanted you to be happy because I'm your friend." "Bill, do you know why this happened?" I asked him. "It happened because you are not a liar." "What?" he said. "This happened because we are adults. We're adults, Bill. We are healthy adults, and to be happy, both physically and mentally, we need to have sex." His mouth opened. "I don't think," he began. "Before you start talking, can I finish?" I asked him. He nodded his head and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Bill, I will never marry again," I said. "Once was enough. I'll never go through this again. But I have a problem. As I already told you, I am a grown woman, and I have needs. Being married means getting used to regular activity. It's not like being lonely when you go out and get rejected a lot. When you're single and looking for sex, it's called luck because it often doesn't happen. You dress up and come home with empty pockets, excited and in a bad mood because the guy turned out to be a loser. When you're married, you can have as much sex as you can handle, at least in the beginning. And even after things slow down, you still get it regularly. This is why many assholes consider divorced women to be easy to get. I don't know about you, Bill. It's December. We've known each other since July. That is, about 6 months have passed. If you haven't been seeing girls for money, I don't think you've been with anyone in the last 6 months. It's been over a year since my divorce," he said. "And it took me even longer," I said. "Besides self-gratification, no one has touched me since I got divorced. I don't know how much longer I can hold on like this. That's why I know you're really not my friend." "What are you talking about?" he asked. "I was pushing you to dance with one of those guys. Who knows what could have happened for you?" "That's what I'm talking about," I said. I pulled the blanket over my head as if the conversation was over. "I don't understand, Sarah," he said quietly. "Bill, these guys don't care," I said. "Instead of seeing it as just a healthy physical release, they would look at me as some kind of bitch. They would just want to use me and throw me away and then talk bad about me." He nodded. "I need someone who will take care of my needs, who won't judge me and won't get too emotionally involved. Someone who knows that I'm not looking for a boyfriend or another husband, but at the same time cares about me so as not to hurt me. It would just be sex without commitment, but without anger or rudeness." "You know," I said, looking at him, "friends with benefits." "I don't know, Sarah," he said. "It just doesn't sound right. What if we ruin what we have? I don't think I'll like it." I could see from his face, even in the dark, that he was taking this conversation seriously. I was important to him, and that filled me with hope. At the same time, I felt very bad because I was still deceiving him. I hoped with all my heart that if we started having sex, we would move on to the next logical step. "We can't ruin what we have," I lied. "Because we're friends, we can always come back to this. If you meet someone you want to start a relationship with, I'll just back off. Will you do the same? I'm not sure I can, he said. Again, his words only increased my desire for him. I knew he would never have to back down because I would never want to be with anyone more than him. You are my only friend, he said. You're the only person I trust. It almost made me just forget about it. He told me his deepest thoughts and feelings, and I just desperately wanted to get into his pants. So, Bill, if this is true, then do you really want to see me go and get some loser because I'm so desperate to be hugged that I have no choice? He shook his head slowly. I'd hate to see you get hurt, Sarah, he said. I lifted the blanket, and he slowly crawled into bed with me. My body began to almost vibrate with desire, and I told him another lie. Bill, I want you to think about this. I don't want you to do anything you really don't want to do, but I think it would be good for both of us. It doesn't mean anything, and nothing will change between us. We will still remain friends. It's just sex. This is only physical liberation. No kissing or anything like that. If you want, we can think about it for a couple of days. If nothing happens before then, we won't talk about it. I'll just find someone else. But for this night, you could just hold me. We don't have to do anything, but I would like to be in someone's arms. Bill very slowly reached out and hugged me. The contact was amazing. I tucked my head under his chin and pressed my chest against his stomach. I felt him trying to unobtrusively move away, and I grabbed him and pulled him back. He was so warm, and I wanted him then more than anyone had ever wanted anything. The only thing separating us were two very thin layers of fabric. Sarah, he breathed. It seemed like he was in pain. I knew then that I was not alone. Passion overcame us, and we had sex. There were so many things I wanted to tell him. I wanted to tell him that I loved him so much that I couldn't stand it, but I knew that if I said it, it would be over and he would never talk to me again. So I kept my feelings inside. We just lay there, exhausted, with him on top, our bodies frantically trying to regain control. Then he did the stupidest thing he could do. He pressed his lips to mine, and we started having sex again. Sorry about the kiss, he said. Bill, just take me, I replied. Bill. After I told Kirk to stay away from Irina, everything turned upside down. I tried to stay away from the cafe where Rebecca was having lunch. I tried my best to block her from my thoughts. Just as sinners and drunkards are completely changed when they begin to believe in a religion or start a 12-step program. I started working on my marriage. When I came home every evening, I would help Irina with cooking or washing the dishes, and I would spend time talking to her or watching TV every evening. She was no longer the young, beautiful girl I had married, but I decided that at least part of it was my fault. I started making suggestions that she start running with me or that we join the gym together. It was a huge mistake. I looked at it from both sides. The first was that in my renewed love and appreciation for my wife, I wanted her to be the best version of herself. I wanted her to be healthier so she could live longer and we could enjoy our life together longer and better. It was also a way for us to spend more time together because that way, when I went out for a run or workout, she could come with me and walk or run or do her own workout. The second reason was purely selfish, but I wanted her to look a little better too. Irina was really attractive when we first met, but we were so young then. For 8 years, she simply stopped taking care of herself. She probably thought that since we were already together, she didn't need to wear makeup or play sports. But I really wanted the world to see how beautiful she could be and why I was attracted to her in the first place. Of course, Irina took this completely wrong. I didn't find out until later that she thought it meant I thought she was fat and ugly and I was encouraging her to lose weight because I found her unattractive. She began to move away from me precisely at the time when I was trying to bring us closer. Life is truly a strange thing. For weeks I tried to distance myself or leave Irina. Now I tried to get closer to her, and she moved away. At the same time, I did my best to learn as much as I could about Rebecca and how she lived. Now she disgusted me, so naturally you know what happened. I should point out that at this stage Rebecca and I had never actually spoken to each other. Our entire relationship or fantasy relationship played out in my head. I saw her, fell in love with her, then built an entire relationship and future around the person I thought she was. When the reality of who she really was didn't match my fantasy, I broke up with her in my head and fell in love with my wife again. Nobody knew about it except me and maybe Kirk, so no one got hurt, right? We can have as many fantasies as we want. The problem was that Rebecca noticed me. Maybe it was because of what Kirk had mentioned, or maybe she just saw me at the cafe, but everything changed. My fantasy began to invade my real life at the most inopportune moment. Kirk and I met in a cafe to discuss the possibility of him working for me. He had recently lost his job and was looking for a new position. At first, I was hesitant because the idea of working with friends doesn't always work. Sometimes friends expect friendship to outweigh the business aspects of the situation. They start breaking the rules or messing around because they're sure their old friend won't fire them. Kirk asked to meet at a coffee shop, and to be honest, I forgot about Rebecca. I agreed to the meeting because I wanted to set the ground rules before Kirk formally applied for the job. I had to let him know that I would not cut him any slack during work hours. To do this would be unfair to my other employees. I really thought hiring Kirk could work because, as the Rebecca situation showed, Kirk really knew how to get results. These skills could really benefit my company. Little did I know that Kirk had almost decided that he already had a job, and this meeting served a completely different purpose. Kirk and I discussed the parameters of what he would do for my company, salary, bonuses, and benefits. We discussed everything you could expect from the interview. The difference was that we did it in a relaxed atmosphere, so we had time for jokes and reminiscing about old times. We were talking about something that happened years ago at my bachelor party when Rebecca came up to our table and said hello to Kirk. He started talking to her, and she sat down. Luckily for me, my watch rang, and I pretended it was set to remind me of the appointment. "Sorry, Kirk," I said. "I have to go to a meeting. Nice to meet you, ma'am." I quickly and efficiently left the cafe. It was the closest I came to her, and my polite farewell was the first time I spoke to her. The only thing I noticed was that she smelled very nice, but I kept wondering what she would smell like after sleeping with 5 or 6 guys in a motel. I also realized how lucky I am. All my plans and machinations could have led to me ending up in the same situation as her husband. For several months, she would give me all of her, probably most of her attention in order to hook me, then years of indifference while she slept with half the guys in the phone book. There would have ended up being a divorce in which she would have gotten more of my assets than she deserved. I would find myself paying for her to have sex with as many guys as she wanted until she found another simpleton. God, I'm lucky. I dodged a high-caliber bullet. I kept thinking, be careful what you wish for. They can come true. Meanwhile, I had a very caring and faithful little woman at home who, although she was not a beauty, was all mine and did not cheat on me. She even resisted the scoundrel master. Of course, we had some minor problems, but most couples do. After a few days, I was at my best. Things were starting to look up at home with Irina, and we were in a good place. She gave me a chance to explain the whole training story. She even kissed me like we used to kiss when we were younger, after I explained to her why I wanted her to start running with me. At the same time, I had just completed negotiations with a company that ended up becoming my largest client and significantly adding value to my business. It was a tough few days, and both companies considered walking away from the negotiating table several times, but we finally reached a contract that was beneficial to both companies. I was on the verge of becoming rich. My timing was perfect, too. If this had happened a little earlier, it would have cost me a lot more money. Anyway, I decided to have a snack. Out of habit, I went to the cafe. Almost as soon as I sat down, I smelled flowers and Rebecca slid smoothly into the seat opposite me. She smiled broadly at me. A few weeks ago, I would have been delighted by her company, but now I had a completely different reaction. It's funny how our mind affects our feelings. We are much more tolerant of a person's physical imperfections when we like them. When I first saw Rebecca, I thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world. She's not really like that. She's quite ordinary, but she has, as I mentioned earlier, an aura of sensuality that makes you think about sex. When I looked at her before, it seemed like sunlight was following her. I swear I thought she was shining like a diamond. But now, sitting directly across from her, separated only by a table, it felt like parasites were crawling on her. Up close, I could see the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, and her skin wasn't as smooth and flawless as I had imagined. Up close, I could see a 40-year-old woman. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. "Bill, are you playing hard to get?" she asked. "Is this your game? Because if so, then it works very well." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Bill, I know you like me," she smiled. "And I know how much. Kirk told me everything. I had to take some details out of it, but I think it's cute." "I think Kirk misunderstood," I said. "I found you attractive, but you know how it happens. We often see people who seem beautiful to us, but the fact is that I am married." "Me too," she smiled. "You see, we already have something in common, but that shouldn't stop us from having fun. And who knows, maybe we would be better off married to each other than to the losers we chose. Kirk says your wife is a sad housewife. You deserve better than this. I think you deserve me. And my husband is such a loser, let me tell you. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just blink and they were together? It would be like I dream of Jeannie. I could just blink and all my problems would disappear." "I have a better idea," I said, smiling. "What if you just blink and disappear on your own? Irina may be sad, but at least she is not an easily accessible woman. And the one who deserves the best is not you, but your husband." I got up and walked away, leaving her sitting there with her mouth open, like a fish out of water. As I was leaving the cafe, I saw Bonnie clapping her hands and giving me a thumbs up. I called Kirk at work. Marcia Brady, our office secretary, told me that Kirk left for lunch shortly after I did. I called him on his cell phone because I needed to talk to an old friend of mine. I didn't know why he told Rebecca about me, but he shouldn't have. He also shouldn't have said bad things about Irina. Knowing Kirk, I was sure he was belittling Irina because she didn't fall for his bullshit. I realized that Irina was right from the very beginning. Maybe Kirk wasn't the right person for me to hang out with. This thought made me do something I hadn't done in years. Instead of going back to work, I went to a flower shop and bought 24 roses. I decided to surprise Irina at home and perhaps invite her to dinner. I parked at the house next to her Taurus. When I saw it, I knew I needed to buy her a better car. Maybe she'll like one of these Lincoln MKZs. I used my key and entered the house. I looked at the kitchen, but she wasn't there. I heard her moving upstairs. I heard a knock. I slowly and quietly walked up the stairs. I wonder what she was doing. Maybe she started her own workout program without telling me. The knocking was rhythmic. The door to our bedroom was half open. I could see them before I got closer. Somehow my brain refused to perceive what was happening. "Kirk, stop it." "I told you that I don't like it," Irina said. "I don't even know why I let you back. I told you the last time was supposed to be the last time." "Irina, just give it a few minutes, baby," Kirk said. "Trust me, you'll like it." As I stood there, I just passed out. All my inhibitions disappeared. I watched my best friend have sex with my wife. "You just don't turn me on, Kirk," she said. "Then why are you sleeping with him?" I asked calmly. I stood in the doorway feeling like the biggest fool on the planet. I was still holding the damn flowers in one hand, and my temperature and blood pressure were rising by the second. I understand now why so many men have heart attacks in these situations. Unfortunately for me, I was in excellent physical shape, although I was quickly losing it emotionally and mentally. Irina looked at me and began to try to push Kirk away from her. Kirk turned and his face went completely white. He froze like a deer in headlights. "Bill," he said. But you said—" "Bill, I'm so sorry," Irina screamed. That's when I lost control. I crossed the room and Kirk jumped off the bed and tried to back away from me. I grabbed him by the throat with both hands and slammed his head against the wall so hard that it cracked. He tried to push me away, but I was too angry. I hit him on the floor and started hitting him in the face and chest. I felt my bones give way, but I didn't stop. "Bill, honey, stop it. You'll kill him," Irina screamed. I turned to look at her, and Kirk knew he wouldn't have another chance. He pushed me away while I was looking at Irina and ran out of the house, still naked. It seemed to me that he grabbed some keys downstairs, but all his clothes were left in the room. His car wasn't parked in the driveway, so he had to run through the streets naked to get to it. I stood up and just looked at Irina. She huddled on the bed, trying to cover herself. "That makes sense," I said. "You walk around naked when you have sex with Kirk, but you cover up so your husband doesn't see you." "Bill, I'm so sorry," she said again, crying. "Irina, you need to get dressed and go to one of your friends," I said. "I don't care where you go, just get out of my sight." "But honey, we need to calm down and talk about this," she said. "We've made a lot of mistakes over the last few years, but we're in a good place now. We were just starting to get close again. We can't let this set us back." I wondered what planet she came from. "Oh, you brought me flowers," she said. "Irina, this won't set us back," I said. "You had sex with another man in my damn house. This is the end of us." Her face changed. She turned dark and vomited. When she finished vomiting the contents of her stomach, she looked at me through her tears and simply said, "No, Bill, you can't say that." "Irina, I can't control myself now," I said. "I'm going back to work. When I get home, I wish you weren't here. All your credit cards will work. You can take your car. Find yourself a lawyer today. I don't want to talk to you at all. Have your lawyer contact me. I'll give him my lawyer's contact information. I'm going to be as fair as I can, but I don't want to see you anymore." She jumped out of bed and ran towards me. I turned and started to leave. She rushed towards me and grabbed my leg to prevent me from leaving. "Bill, please give me another chance," she cried. "I'll do anything. I love you, Bill." "Irina," I said, trying to free her hands from my leg. "Do you know how many women Kirk has had in the last couple of weeks?" She stopped and looked at me. "I know of at least 4, I said. "At least one of them is probably the worst easy to get woman on the planet. Who knows what diseases she could have passed on to him, and he may have passed them on to you. You should get checked. But first, find a lawyer." "But I was angry," she said in a quiet, desperate voice. I thought. "No, Irina, you didn't think," I said. "But now we're even. I'm angry too." When I got back into my Mustang, I called the security guards at work. I told them that James Kirk was immediately fired and was no longer allowed on the premises. If he tries to enter the building, he should be turned away and told that his personal effects will be delivered to his home. He was required to hand over his keys and any other property to the company in exchange for the return of all his personal belongings from the building. Returning to work was difficult. I was so angry that I couldn't even cope with simple things. I think I drove the whole way to work in first gear. The trip, which usually takes me 15 minutes, took more than half an hour. I've stood at the same traffic light a couple of times. The third time I was stopped by a policeman. "Your license and registration," he said. I showed him both documents. I also gave him proof of insurance, and he verified me through the computer. "Mr. Reed, you have a clean driving record, and I don't smell any alcohol on you. You drive strangely, however." "Sorry, officer," I said. "I'm not myself. I just caught my wife with another man." He closed his book of fines and told me to drive more carefully. He didn't say anything else, but I could tell he was embarrassed. It also seemed to me that he himself went through this. It's really strange that as people, as human beings, the sexes react differently to pain and problems. If I were a woman telling another woman what just happened, the other woman would comfort me and hug me to make me feel better. We would sympathize with each other and agree that all men are bastards. But when a man tells another man about something like this, both men feel awkward to the point that it just hurts to be around each other. Both feel worse after this. In the cop's case, I think he was more concerned about not reliving the feelings he had when it happened to him. Even if it's a man who hasn't been through it, they stay as far away from you as possible. It's like they think it's contagious and they don't want to get infected. Sarah. Sex with Bill that first night was the most incredible thing that had ever happened to me. It was worth the wait. I don't know how he felt, but in my eyes we weren't just having wild sex, we were making love. Once we started, all our rules went out the window except one. While we were doing this, the whole "it's just a physical release" idea didn't apply. The no kissing rule was thrown out. If I thought I loved him before, then after we finished, I was ready to throw myself in front of the tank for his sake. We continued until neither of us could move. I was exhausted and sweaty, and he didn't care. He held me in his arms all night while we slept. I was sure it was a dream. The next morning, I woke up to Bill trying to get between my legs. Bill, didn't you have enough last night?" I asked. "Apparently not," he said sleepily. "Sorry," he added. "So what are you waiting for?" I asked. "Remember, we have to take care of each other's needs. Last night, I really needed you. This morning, you need me. Come and get it." We did it, but in a completely different way. It was slow and very gentle. No one has ever treated me with such love. "Bill, you're lucky I'm on birth control," I told him. "Otherwise, we would have to renegotiate this whole arrangement." The rest of the trip was different, but not surprising. If you take away the lack of sex from our previous relationship, it was already almost perfect. We still spent almost every minute together. We weren't more demonstrative than before, but this was different. I often wanted him to hold my hand like other couples did. And God, how sometimes I wanted him to kiss me more than I wanted to breathe. On the other hand, when other men approached me, I could see the anger in Bill's eyes, although he still pretended to not care. And Bill isn't as good an actor as he thinks he is. Over the past few years, several men have sworn that Bill is schizophrenic. They think this because the moment he declares that we are just friends, and they are completely free to dance with me, or ask me out, or on a date, he looks at them like he would kill them in their sleep if they did. Will do. So I give them my phone number, but when they call I explain how things really are, and that I'm not interested in anyone but him. I then tell him that they never called me, and that I'm not interested in dating at all. The funny thing is that this is actually true. I don't need to date someone because I already have the man I want. I made a mistake once. I told Bill that the guy we were talking about just wanted sex. I thought he would think I was right to refuse him. He shocked me by asking, "Well, don't we do the same thing?" he asked. "We just have sex to relieve tension and meet our physical needs." "But we're used to each other," I said. "And since we haven't been with anyone but each other for a long time, we don't have to worry about getting sick. I think that if one of us has sex with another person, we should tell the other so that each of us is aware of the increased risk." "It's a good idea," he said. "This has been going on for many years. Bill and I have been together for almost 6 years. In some states, we might be considered married. I spend more time at Bill's than at my apartment. I have access to all his accounts, and I even remodeled his house. I love being with him even more than in the beginning. There are some wonderful benefits to being single. We should try harder to please each other because each of us could easily find someone else. And unlike many married couples, our sex hasn't slowed down. Since we are only friends, we cannot take each other for granted. There are no laws binding us to each other. Bill could easily pick up some waitress, take her home, and fuck her brains out if he wanted. I could do nothing but stand and watch with jealousy. There are some things about us that have bothered me for a long time. Most of my married friends are jealous of my relationship with Bill. It's not just about the money that they envy. These are the things Bill does for me. And that's how Bill treats me. When one of my friends got divorced, her husband started hitting on me. We were at a barbecue, and he started telling me stuff about women over 35, divorced and slightly overweight. He caught me in the hallway and tried to grab my ass. I caught his hand before he touched me and said, "No." "Come on, baby, you've been shaking that ass for me all evening," he said. His face contorted with lust. I was going to say something to him or try to warn him, but it was too late. I felt Bill's hand brush past my shoulder next to my head. I even felt his fist hit the guy's eye before he fell to the floor. Next thing I knew, Bill grabbed my hand, and we left the barbecue after explaining to the owner what had happened. We found out that this guy was hitting on most of the women at the party. The difference was that married men took their wives for granted and simply expected them not to let the guy try something. Bill was jealous that I might want this guy's attention. Many of the people who work for Bill are engineers of one kind or another. These guys taught me a lot of things that I really needed to pay attention to. One of those things is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Another, the opposite of good is best. For almost 6 years, I have been living with a man who treats me better than I could have expected. He gives me everything I want. We travel often and take several vacations a year. He never takes me for granted, and even as I change over the years, he loves my body and every new wrinkle. Let me give you an example. Bill and I were together for a while a few years ago. He was always running and training. In the winter, he runs on a treadmill, so we have one in the gym. I decided to start walking and running a little on the treadmill. As we age, certain body types tend to accumulate fat in certain areas. I didn't want Bill to stop appreciating my strengths because he could always just replace me. I know he wouldn't do that because, although he'll never say it, Bill loves me, and we've been more than friends for a long time. So, I put on my headphones and walked on the treadmill. Bill walked in and stood on one of his machines. I heard him when he started, and after a few repetitions, I no longer heard the sound of the scales. I turned around and saw Bill looking at me. I smiled at him and continued walking. Suddenly, I realized that if I'm on his treadmill, he can't do his run. I looked at him and was about to say that I would release her in a few minutes when he grabbed me. I thought he was really angry because I knew how serious he was about his runs. The next thing I knew, Bill pushed me to the floor, and we started making love. It was very unexpected, and it made everything even hotter. After he finished, he apologized while I laughed at him. He said he was trying to train, but when he saw my ass moving from side to side, something came over him, and he had to have me then and there. Now, I only work out when Bill is running outside, unless we go together. If not, we always end up having sex. It's pretty bad. One day, I had a few friends over to start one of those women's training groups. Bill walked in and saw me leaning over the bench doing a dumbbell exercise. He came in and said hello to the women who were visiting me. He asked me to talk to him for a minute. We walked up the stairs to the bedroom, and he took me right there on the bed. He didn't even bother to close the door. When I returned downstairs to my guests, they were all in shock. "Sorry," I said. "We needed to talk about something." I didn't realize that the bedroom was right above the gym, and they heard not only my moans and the rumble of the bed, but also how I begged Bill to take me harder. "We, heard you," Tina said. "Does this happen often?" Teresa asked again. I just nodded. "Why did we even get married?" said Sally. Basically, I didn't realize how special what I had was. I kept focusing on one or two small flaws in my relationship with Bill. One of my friends came up with an idea. Teresa told me that I could get everything I wanted and more by using Bill's weakness against him. She reminded me of how jealous Bill was when another man gave me attention. I told her it was a stupid idea, but she reminded me that Bill and I weren't married, so I really could do whatever I wanted. "Isn't that what he always tells guys?" she said. "I've heard him say that at least 1,000 times. He always says that you can do whatever you want. You are not married." "Terry, I don't want other men," I said. "I just want, well, you know what I want." "But that's the beauty," she said. "It will just be a performance. I will ask my brother to flirt with you. I will warn him that if Bill gets angry, he needs to leave because Bill has a short temper. Then you and Bill can talk like you always do, and you can tell him you didn't do anything wrong. You're not married to him, so he either makes a decision or leaves." I thought about it for a few days and decided it couldn't hurt. I was desperate and couldn't imagine it not working. I knew Bill loved me, and all we needed to do was talk. I imagined him getting mad at Frankie, and then Bill and I leaving together and having a long conversation after he had sex with me until he was exhausted. Bill and I often had both sex after arguments and sex because of jealousy. Of the two, I think I enjoy sex more because of jealousy. In this case, Bill is emphatically showing that I am his, and that he is better for me than anyone else. Sex after arguments gave me a warm feeling, but sex because of jealousy turned me into a quivering mass of flesh, and we didn't need to argue to get it. It could be something as simple as a stupid waiter smiling at me and me smiling back. So Teresa and I made all the preparations. Teresa drove her car to the restaurant, and Bill and I drove my Elena. Bill and I still can't dance, but we floated around the dance floor, holding each other as usual. I almost didn't dare to do this. We had almost ordered dessert when Teresa's brother, Frankie, came to our table. He looked at Bill and said, "Sir, I would be honored if you would allow me to dance with your fair lady." Bill looked at Frankie, who was a few years younger than us, and said, "She can do whatever she wants. We are not married." Under normal circumstances, I would have said, "Thanks for the offer, but I'm still out of breath," or something like that. I think Bill was shocked when I said, "My pleasure." Frankie took me to the dance floor, and we danced, I guess. It wasn't much different from what Bill and I usually do. Frankie is a man, and as he pulled me closer, he became aroused. It's funny, but it didn't affect me at all. I just whispered to him to get his thing away from me, or I'll do it myself. Bill and Teresa didn't know what we were talking about. Bill couldn't take his eyes off me. I saw that he was about to get up several times. Teresa tried to calm Bill down. I was sure she didn't want her brother to get hurt. I was wrong, but I found out about it later. When I returned to the table, Bill was calm but slightly tense. I was already aroused by the thought of sex due to jealousy. Teresa made small talk, and Bill didn't say a word. Teresa signaled to Frankie, and he came over again and asked her to dance. This was to give Bill and I a chance to talk. When Frankie and Teresa returned to the table, since nothing had changed, our plan was to wave the red rag at Bill. Frankie told me that he enjoyed dancing with me and wanted to spend more time with me. I was ready to hold Bill, and Teresa was ready to jump between us two. Bill simply said, "Great idea. Hope you have a good time. I'll go pay the bill and go back to my house. Thank you for a pleasant evening. You two go ahead." Frankie, Teresa, and I were stunned. We didn't know what to do. "But Bill, you brought us here in my car," I said. "I can't leave you here." "They have a new thing they call taxi," he said. "I'll be fine." "Bill, I could take you home," Teresa said. She looked very funny saying this. "No, thank you," Bill said. When he said this, the look in his eyes told me that there was something going on here that I didn't know about. "Goodbye," he said. "I'll wait for the waiter." "But Bill," I began. "Goodbye, Sarah," he said. "Have fun." I was almost in tears. "Be nice to her," he told Frankie. "She was my best friend." Frankie, Teresa, and I walked out into the parking lot. Frankie held my hand. Other than that, I don't think I would have left the table. Teresa said I would have to take Frankie home. If Bill sees him leaving with her, he'll know we set it up. She said the smartest way to save the situation was for me to take Frankie home and then go home myself. That way I could talk to Bill about what happened, and he would know there wasn't enough time for anything serious to happen. But if Teresa had driven Frankie home, he would have known something was wrong. "To hell with it," I said, and I headed back to the restaurant. Too many things went wrong with the plan. Bill didn't get jealous. Does this mean he knew Frankie from somewhere and knew he was Teresa's brother or something else? Maybe Bill wasn't jealous because he got bored with me and wanted someone else. There was also the fact that he didn't say he was coming home or to our house like he usually did. He said his house. Does this mean that I was no longer welcome there? And the thing that threw me off guard was when he said she was my best friend. He said was. I was afraid that I had just lost the best thing in my life because of Teresa's stupid scheme. Why did I do this? I was just as stupid as she was. This was especially bad considering how Bill feels about betrayal. When I first met him, he was a broken little boy. He was so scared of trying to love someone again after what happened with his first wife. He hid behind his car instead of driving it. He just became my reason to live over the years, and I ruined everything. I walked back into the restaurant, determined to tell him everything and fix the situation between us. I approached our table. The waiter was clearing away the dishes while another couple stood near the table, waiting to be seated. "Are you forgetting something?" asked the waiter. "Where is the man I was sitting here with?" I asked, almost in tears. "He paid the bill and left," the waiter said. "I was standing outside. He didn't pass me by," I said. "He left through the other door," the waiter said sarcastically. He pointed to the door that was directly opposite the one I entered through. I walked out that door, and when the doorman opened it for me, I asked him about the man who had just come out. I asked which taxi he got into. "He didn't get into the taxi," the doorman said. "He took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and just ran. He didn't run down the road. It was very cool. He had GPS software on his iPhone, entered the address, and just ran across the field. I don't think a car can drive on this kind of terrain. It's too rough." I started crying. I couldn't stop. Frankie and Teresa came up to me. Teresa suggested we go to our house and wait for Bill to try to explain while I took Frankie home. "Nice car," Frankie said. "What is it, Mustang?" I didn't have the patience to talk to him. "Everything will be fine," he said. He patted my thigh to calm me down. A few minutes later, his hand was still there. I was too upset and didn't even want to talk to him, so I ignored him. I kept trying to figure out where we went wrong. Why did Bill react the way he did? Did he really not want me anymore? The next thing I noticed, Frankie's hand was already under my skirt. I slammed on the brakes and told him to get out of my car. "Sorry," he said. "I was just trying to make you feel better. That guy you were with doesn't want you anymore, so I wanted you to feel like someone else wants you." "What makes you think I want this?" I asked. "Teresa always told me about you and your boyfriend, how you have sex all the time. She says you must be a nymphomaniac." "Frankie, I'm not a nymphomaniac," I said calmly. "I'm just in love. There's only one guy who makes me react this way, and we just scared him away." "How should I get home?" asked Frankie. "They have a new thing called taxi," I said. "Bill, it's been 2 days since I caught Irene and Kirk together, and the pain still hasn't subsided. I had recovered from the initial shock and was functioning again, but I had no idea how to put my life back together. My lawyer and my tax advisor got together and told me I needed to get this settled as quickly as possible. Over the next 90 days, contracts with my new client will be completed and the value of my company will skyrocket. Now my small company was worth less than $1 million. Very soon it will cost at least 10 times more. They both said it was in my best interest to work things out with Irene quickly. She called me almost every hour, begging to meet. I called her and asked her to come in the evening. That afternoon, I went to Kirk's apartment to return his things. He invited me in. His ribs were bandaged and his face covered in bandages. Both eyes were blackened and his nose was broken. "Sorry, Bill," he mumbled. "I guess I just don't take well to being told no." "When did it start?" I asked. "What did you say to make my faithful wife one of your bitches?" "It didn't start," he said. "I didn't do anything. She rejected me every damn time. And then she called me out of the blue. I realized she was really mad at you, Bill. That made it worse for me. I pulled all my best moves and got nothing from her. You told me to leave her alone, and I just wrote her off as being immune to my charm. And then she called me and complained about you all the time. I got her drunk and slept with her. She just lay there like a stone, telling me that I didn't know what I was doing and that I was terrible. She said that I was worse than a teenager having his first experience and that I should stop. Bill, I've slept with hundreds of women and never wondered if they liked it. I always thought I was good in bed. And here is this ordinary, boring woman telling me that I'm no good. And what's worse, she says that you, who've probably been with 3 women in your life, are better than me, Bill. So I started stalking her, begging for a second chance. I told her I'd make her beg for sex. She just laughed at me. So I had to use force. I told her I'll tell you about our sex. She said, "I can do this one more time, but it will be the last time. When you left for lunch that day, I knew that Rebecca was coming for you, so I decided that this was the best time for me. I know it was stupid and wrong, but we all have our weaknesses. You have to understand that Irene is not my type. I don't like her, and I don't want to spend my whole life with her. But the blow to my ego was too big to ignore. Maybe James Tiberius Kirk should have thought about the fact that Irene wasn't just a bitch. She was someone your ex-best friend actually cared about, I said. Here are your things. Hey, what about my severance package? He asked. Kirk, I said, looking at him seriously, you're lucky I didn't cut off your farm. 10 minutes to 6, 40 minutes before she was due to arrive, Irene knocked on my door. The locks have already been changed. She fumbled with the keys for a few minutes before she simply knocked on the door. My keys don't fit, she said when I opened the door. Bill, please forgive me, She started, but I just raised my hand. Irene, I forgive you, I said. She held out her arms for a hug, and I wrapped my arms around her and squeezed her tightly. I'll never do that again, she said. I learned my lesson. I cried for days thinking about how much I hurt you and how I would feel if you did that to me. I'm almost done, I said. She looked at me strangely. Irene, I don't want the courts and lawyers to run our divorce, I said. I think if we're both honest, we can find something that works for both of us. What are you talking about? She asked. You said you forgive me. Irene, I truly forgive you, and I say it from the bottom of my heart. I still love you very much. But you cheated on me. I can forgive you, but I can't forget. I don't even know why. What I know is that we were both tested. In a way, it's really my fault. How is this your fault? She asked. Irene, I'm getting bored with us, I began. I told her almost everything. I didn't tell her the whole truth, but what I said was close enough to the truth. I told her how bored I was with the us. I told her about how I tried to get Kirk to test her, and how she passed the test with flying colors, and the fact that she loved me so much and was faithful to me made me love her again. I told her how I wanted her to be with me forever, so I wanted her to start training with me. I even told her that it would give us something in common and a way to spend more time together. Finally, I told her how Rebecca had been hitting on me and how I told her I was married and rejected her. I told her that we had both been tested, and although I didn't tell her that she had failed, she knew it. Okay, I lied and left some things out. I didn't tell her how my obsession with Rebecca had caused all of this, or how my vain belief that I deserved someone prettier had started this whole thing with Rebecca. She didn't need to know that. I'm not perfect, but damn, I did not cheat. Okay, to be completely honest, I have to admit that if Rebecca hadn't turned out to be a sex-hungry bitch, I probably would have had her by now. But again, she didn't need to know that, and I wasn't cheating. But Bill, I didn't understand all this, she said. When you started paying attention to me again, I was so happy. Then you started telling me that I should work out. I got angry. I thought you were telling me that I was fat and ugly. I remembered how your slimy friend walked around me for weeks. I kept thinking, Kirk doesn't think I'm fat and ugly. He wants me. Irene, Kirk doesn't love anyone but Kirk. He uses women and then just throws them away, I said. You should be. I know I was stupid, she said. We divided everything in half. Even the lawyers were impressed. We sold the house and split the proceeds. I even set up a 3-year payment plan where I gave Irene 50% of the value of my business. My lawyer thought I was crazy. Irene was also willing to settle for less because she wanted us to remain friends. I think she hoped deep down that someday we could make things right. It was a sad day when we signed the final resolution. That evening we went to dinner and said goodbye. Irene returned to the small town in Pennsylvania where she grew up. The timing of the signing was perfect. 10 days later, my company was worth almost 10 times what it was worth when I gave Irene 50%. Did I deceive her? Maybe. Did she deserve it? Maybe. But I was done with women for the rest of my life. I didn't want to get married anymore. This whole situation made me realize that it's just not worth it. I have always believed that there are good women and bad ones. Good women are faithful. Bad women are easily accessible like Rebecca. Irene's situation convinced me that, under certain circumstances, even a good woman can become a bitch. So if that's the case, they're all the same, and I don't need them. I did not change. Sarah. I called Bill, but he didn't answer the phone. I imagined him running through the forest, upset and in danger, because he thought that I had betrayed him. He thought that I had done to him the same thing that his ex-wife had done to him, that which had left him emotionally vulnerable. I called Teresa, and she said he hadn't come home yet. She was leaving, and I had to deal with Bill myself. I put Elena in the garage and went to bed. I jumped up at every sound and ran to the door, hoping that he would return. The next morning, I woke up crying when I heard the doorbell ring. It was just a courier delivering a package. I couldn't stand walking through that house and looking at pictures of us, knowing that I could lose Bill. I returned to my empty small apartment. I left Elena at her house in Bill's garage. I left a note on her hood saying that Elena was my heart and she should stay with it. His response was equally cold. I found Elena parked in front of my house with a note on the dashboard. I shouldn't give my heart to someone who was just a friend. Perhaps I should give it to the one I chose to be with me. He also wrote that he would miss Elena. The next day I went into the house again and was angry. He will miss my car, but not a word about him missing me. After everything we've been through, I discovered that he was gone and all the locks had changed. Strangely, his message became even clearer. I could no longer enter the garage where he kept his cars, but I could still open the door where we kept Elena. That told me everything. Elena will always be welcome, but I will not. I spent 3 days crying in my apartment until Teresa showed up. After Teresa left, I realized that I was wasting my time crying. I love Bill too much to just give up. I have never cheated on him, despite what he thinks. If he doesn't want me in his life, he should tell me so himself. If he tells me that, if he can look me in the eyes and tell me he doesn't want me in his life after I explain myself, then I'll leave him alone. For a day. Then he would have to repeat it the next day, and the next, and again the next. I will never give up. I got up and washed my face. I didn't want to look terrible with smudged makeup. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I thought, I look like an ordinary woman. I have really good hair, but I'm no Jennifer Love Hewitt, and I just can't understand what Bill loves so much about my body. But he loves me, I'm sure of it. Or at least he did before I started all this. They say that hindsight is easy to judge, and now that everything is screwed up, I see many ways I could have achieved my goals better. I guess I should have just told Bill what I wanted and always wanted. Maybe if I was honest, I should have told him that I had been lying to him all these years. I could tell him that our entire wonderful relationship was built on a lie, because despite everything I told him, I never wanted to be his friend. From the day I met him on the dream cruise, I have always loved him. I just hid behind friendship because I knew that otherwise I would lose him. No, there is such a thing as too much honesty. The truth sets you free. The problem is that I don't want to be free. I want to be involved with Bill for the rest of our lives, so screw the truth. The truth is to be used as needed, and Bill doesn't need to know that. I'm not religious, so I didn't get down on my knees and pray, but I made a quiet wish for the one watching over us all to give me another chance. I'm too old and have too big an ass to even think about wearing a short skirt, but I can steal the show in a long, tight skirt. I chose a high-waisted pencil skirt that reached mid-calf. This is one of Bill's favorites, and it really flatters my figure. The high waist also tightens my stomach and makes my breasts appear even larger. I was about to leave when the phone rang. I thought about ignoring him. It must be my nosy brother or Teresa again. I picked up the phone and said, "Hello." The tone of my voice made it clear that I was not in the mood for idle chatter. "Bill." Bobby took another long sip of his beer. He then placed the jar next to the first one. He looked at me. "Do you want another one?" I asked. "Probably shouldn't, since I'll have to drive and I'll probably be gone soon." I looked at him and saw that he was smiling. "It really won't take long," he smiled. I felt very nervous. "I understand a lot more now than when I came here," he said and shook his head. So what are you going to do with my sister? He asked. Well, I'm going to give her some money, I said. She'll probably never have to work again unless she wants to. He smiled again and shook his head. So she'll get more money than your first wife? He asked. I nodded. Of course he will, he said, smiling. What a fool you are. Did you ever tell your first wife the version of events you told me? He asked. No, that wasn't necessary, I said. I haven't spoken to her for years. She sends me a card on my birthday and Christmas. Sarah answers them for me and also sends her a card on her birthday and Christmas. Irene has a good life. I think she's become a teacher or something like that. Did she ever get married again? He asked. I don't think so, I said. He nodded again. You're not married to my sister, he said. You understand that, right? I nodded. So why the hell are you going to give her more money than the woman you were legally married to? You don't have to give her anything, he said. Why? He asked loudly. Before I could say anything, he started again. It's a feeling of guilt, isn't it? You feel guilty because most of the time you were together, you tortured her. And you know what? Money isn't enough. But I began. I tried to be kind to her. I thought I was good to her. I never even raised my voice to her. I never hurt Sarah. You can't even say it, can you? He smiled. Damn it, what a mess you have. He just sat there, smiling. Traffic will be difficult, and I have a date today. Of course, my date will be with an older woman, so it will probably be boring compared to you and my sister traveling all over the country in your Mustangs and all over the world when you get older. Boring. Do you know what I do? He asked. Did Sarah ever tell you? No, I said. I am a psychologist. I do family and emotional therapy, so I understand something about this. First of all, you can relax. I know you never tried to hurt my sister. I also know that you would probably bite your hand off before you hit it, but realistically, you still tormented her. My mouth fell open. Why are you going to give her a ton of money to get rid of her? Because you're old-fashioned and stupid and think she cheated on you and can't handle it. That's good. We should all have rules and conditions. You know that you can and cannot accept from your partner. This is very healthy. The reason why you want to give her money when you could just walk away is at the heart of our problem. You were so hurt by all the crap that happened in your first marriage. I decided to never go through this pain again. Again, that makes sense. But the fact is, you love my sister. He raised his hand before I could say anything. You love her so much that even if you can't be with her, you want her to be provided for and get what she wants in life. You don't have to say anything, but I'm not wrong, am I? I just looked at the floor, and he started nodding his head. I knew it, he said. Damn, everyone knows it. And that's the problem, he said. Because Sarah loves you as much as you love her. All this friendship crap is tearing her apart. You've been torturing her so much. This woman wants to tell you she loves you so bad it's killing her. She wants to go with you down the street and hold your hand. She wants to scream about it when you, well, you know. And not being able to do that out of fear that you'll tear everything apart hurts her. More than anything, I think she wants you to be hers and she to be yours. It's a simple little thing that even teenagers understand. But why? Is that the reason you two couldn't figure it out? Have you ever slept with anyone since you and Sarah have been together? No, I said. And before that night when you gave her permission, she didn't sleep with anyone either, right? He asked. That's right, I said. So even if you're just friends and you gave her permission to leave with that guy from the restaurant, you didn't like it, right? I hated it, I said. The tone of my voice and the expression on my face showed him how much. Why? He asked. I couldn't say anything. I knew what I wanted to say, but the words just wouldn't come out. You'll have to work on that, he chuckled. It was just so cheesy, I said. I was hurt, I was jealous, and it was like they planned it. What do you mean? He asked. While Sarah was with that guy, her friend was trying to get me to take her home. She kept saying things like, while Sarah is busy, You should have some fun too. It was like she was trying to arrange some kind of exchange. And I'm sure she knew the guy too. The only reason I didn't kick his ass was because it just seemed like the three of them were playing with me. I don't trust many people, but I always trusted Sarah. I mean, if she got tired of me and wanted someone else, all she had to do was say. We always knew that the day might come when one or both of us wanted to settle down with someone that. So you're saying Teresa was hitting on you? He asked. Yes, I said, but I think she only did it so Sarah wouldn't feel guilty about leaving me for a new guy. And her new boyfriend is already engaged to another woman. Or was. What do you mean, was? He asked. Well, I hired a private investigator to find out about him. I couldn't just let Sarah end up with some jerk. If he turned out to be normal, I could just look at it as the best man winning. But he's a scumbag. I mean, what kind of person goes off to have sex with a woman when he's already engaged to someone else? When I looked at Bobby, his eyes went wide. He was surprised. Bill, I don't think Sarah knew that Teresa was hitting on you. You're right, that whole night was a setup. Sarah told me about it, and I told her how stupid it was. But it wasn't. How do you think? Whereas, I asked, I was starting to get a little angry. Bill, Sarah wanted you to admit how much you love her. Like I said, this friendship crap is tearing her apart. She and Teresa made Teresa's brother, Frankie, hit on Sarah at a restaurant. They thought you'd be jealous, as always, and Sarah will be able to tell you that if you're just friends, there shouldn't be a problem with her dancing or leaving with him. It shouldn't have mattered. So you had to admit that you were more than friends. She had no intention of leaving Frankie. She also would never sleep with him, and didn't. In fact, she was scared when you left. She didn't know Teresa was trying to hit on you. Apparently, Teresa didn't give up because she convinced Sarah to let her go to your house and try to talk to you. Meanwhile, Sarah had to take Frankie home. Sarah's leg when they were in the car, and she left him on the side of the road. Does that sound like a woman who was going to cheat on you? I smiled and shook my head. So what are you going to do about all this? You know that just giving her money won't be enough. She'll be miserable for the rest of her life without you. I picked up my phone and clicked on Sarah's photo in my call log. Hello, she said angrily. What? I asked. Sorry, Bill, she said. I didn't know it was you. I'm so glad you called. Sarah, where the hell is Elena? I asked. I was going to wash the cars, and she's not in the garage. But Bill, you sent her, she began. Sarah, no excuses, I said sharply. Get ready to go home now. We need to discuss something. We need to go shopping. Bill, we went shopping the other day. You couldn't eat all the food in the house in 3 days by yourself. Did you have a party? Who did you invite? Not for food, Sarah, I said. We need to buy something else, so are you coming home or not? Bill, I'll be with you in 10 minutes, she said happily. Where will you be? I asked sharply. At your house, she said. Sarah, this has always been our home since you first walked in, I said. Okay, I'll give you a good 80% for it, Bobby said as I hung up. You still haven't told her. You can give me another beer. Maybe I'll stay to see how this ends. Well, she didn't tell me either, I said. She's so afraid of losing you that she's afraid to say it, he said. But look, just let her know that she can, and it will start pouring out. She may never stop. But anyone who knows her can see it. Damn, my sister is not the woman that anyone will command. But you told her to come home, and voila, she's on her way. A few minutes later, we heard Elena's engine and exhaust as Sarah pulled into the driveway. She knocked on the door, and I opened it. She rushed at me, and I hugged her back. We have become a tangled ball of arms and legs. Then she jumped away from me, noticing her brother. It was just a friendly hug, she said. If everyone had friends like this, no one would ever need to get married, said Bobby. Well, Bill and I have been best friends for a long time, she said sharply. And we'll be friends forever, right, Bill? She asked. I shook my head and her face darkened. Sarah, what happened that night and my conversation with your brother made me realize something. I just don't think we can be friends anymore. But Bill, nothing happened to that guy. I swear. I'll never let anything like that happen again. I will. She trailed off as I covered her mouth with a kiss, and she just melted into my arms. I love you, Sarah, I said. I've probably been realizing this for a long time, so if you don't mind, I think we should go and pick out an engagement ring. Oh, Bill, she said, crying. Please, let's do this. Later. She looked at Bobby. Bobby, you're my brother and I love you, but you should probably leave. I don't think you need to see what's going to happen and how I'm going to act. Bill, don't forget to tell her about Teresa, he said. Bobby seemed to be in a hurry to leave the house. Before I drag you to bed, I need to tell you something, Sarah said. Even as she said this, she was moving closer to me, unbuttoning her blouse. I love you, Bill Reed, and I have for a long time. It's so nice to say. I can never stop saying it. Sarah. Bill and I decided to get married on the Dream Cruise this year, which was a few months away. This was great because we would have time to prepare. We decided, as always, to do it our own way, so we went on our honeymoon first. We're going on the same cruise where we first made love. We discussed everything that happened that night with Teresa and Frankie and made some decisions. First, Frankie will remain punished. Bill was going to let his detective let Frankie go and tell his ex-fiancée that nothing happened between us until it turned out that Frankie touched my leg. We decided that Frankie deserved his punishment, and maybe next time he won't try to be sneaky. My best friend Teresa deserved it too. She tried to steal Bill from me as part of a plan. It turned out that Teresa had seen Bill and me together too many times and wanted to try her hand at him. It was a risk, but she thought she had nothing to lose. She even told a few of our mutual friends that since she was thinner than me, she might have a chance with him. On the way to the airport, I called her and told her I wanted to talk to her about the situation with Frankie. I thought that this way she would not be on her guard. Bill drove up to her house. We went in a Jeep because there was no way we would leave one of our Mustangs at the airport. They sat comfortably in their garages. Be quick, honey. We don't have much time, he said as I got out of the Jeep. I love it when he calls me darling. I walked around to the driver's side and motioned for him to roll down the window. I leaned over and kissed him. His breath was minty and fresh. Where is it? I asked him. He looked at me in confusion. Peppermint candy, I said. Where is she? In the mouth, he laughed. I hugged his neck and kissed him again. This time I searched his mouth with my tongue until I found his lollipop. We share everything, I said. I wanted half of this candy. I love you, Bill. I love you too, he said, smiling. My face became serious and I walked towards Teresa's door. Before I could knock, she opened the door. So it worked, huh? She said nervously. I told you. You had him wrapped around your little finger. I think Big Bad Bill is Sweet Willie now. Stick with me, Sarah, and you'll have everything you want. I didn't say anything. I just swung my hand and hit her in the face as hard as I could. The blow knocked her off her feet. I can't imagine how men do this. My hand hurt as much as her face must have. She sat down on the floor. Bitch, I spat. I already have everything I want, and you tried to take it away. I returned to the Jeep and sat inside. I hugged Bill again, and we headed to the airport. I looked out the window and smiled at everything I saw. Some of you may be wondering if I told Bill the complete truth about my interest in him, and that I wanted him from the very beginning. I know a lot of you idiots really believe that honesty is the best policy and all that. Bill also never told his first wife the whole truth about their separation. As I said before, the truth should be used as needed, and Bill doesn't need to know that. The only thing he needs to know is that I love him and always will. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.